Affidavit of posting. The agenda was posted in the office of county clerk on the 15th day of July 2021. Notice was sent to the Westman Daily News, Express News, WIBD, WMBZ Radio, WTKM Radio, My Community Now, Hartford Times Press, the Kewaskum Statesman, and the Milwaukee Journal Sentinel. We'll begin with a roll call. Everyone is here. Do we have Supervisor Bossert and Mahalik on Zoom?
I am here on Zoom. Thank you.
Okay. We're waiting for Supervisor Mahalik to enter via Zoom. Let's do the Pledge of Allegiance, please. Pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Next on the agenda is consent agenda. I'll entertain a motion.
Motion to approve.
Motion Kelling, second by Mary. Any changes, discussion? Seeing none, all in favor, signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion passes. Discussion items. Community Development Block Grant, CDBG, remodeling concept drawings and update. You gonna have it up on the screen too, Scott?
I'm ready to go. Who did the movie? Thank you, Mr. Chairman. What we're looking for is some more defined direction today. As you know, you've been seeing some concept drawings. What we're looking at today is the move from concept drawings, and we like to say, yep, these are what we want to go with, so we can actually get more finalized drawings. We have certain timelines we have to meet. For this, we have to make sure that we're actually starting construction by the end of the year. And so we need to keep this process moving along. You've seen these concepts before, so hopefully nothing is new to you. And what we'll do is we'll start with what you see up on your screen as the county boardroom as you're looking at it in the future. We looked at I'll call it a horseshoe shape for that, as well as then a table in the middle. The table in the middle would be movable and removable. If you look I'll see if this works, if I can do this. In the upper right-hand corner, you'll see that this door that's to your right here, we would actually expand that to have it open up and have a little, there must be something word for it. Side leaf, thank you, to open up that door. So basically it allows us a little bit more room to get that table in and out of the room if need be. I was told it would fold up kind of like a cafeteria table back in like my middle school and elementary school days, right? You stand like the picnic table would fold up in the gym, would go up against the wall. So something similar to that, obviously professional looking, but it would be removable from the middle of the room if you want to have board meetings or something like that, but also be able to leave it in there if you want to have a smaller meeting. If the county executive wants to be with his staff, or we're coming over here meeting with the architect or something like that, it's a smaller meeting where you're a little bit closer together. So we're looking at that type of a meeting. So you can see that you'd have the seating on your right. We have some samples here too, if Kara wants to kind of show those to you right now, of flooring. So you see a gray, kind of a veneer, if you will, and then the carpeting. So this area here would be, again, a hard surface area, kind of where the audience spectators are, and then obviously a carpeted area over the rest of the boardroom is what we'll be looking at. So this is kind of the concept phase. Again, a lot of the desks will be movable. The next page then floats down into the future. If and when the board size change, you'll see the reduction in the where the county board supervisors sit, right? That area becomes smaller, and what happens is then if you see the podium and with a table where the county executive sit would move up, and we'd incorporate that. Supervisor Bossert has to put like a little 3-foot high wall to kind of separate the spectators from the county executive as well as the county board. So that would be that wall that you see where it says the 3-foot area right here. There'd be a little half wall, also be bolted to the ground, but potentially movable as well in that location. Bolted into the ground to get a little more stability. but actually still be removable if need be. So this would be kind of the after the realignment. If the board so chooses, and it has in the past, to reduce the size, and then this will look like to begin with. So you kind of see what I'm getting at there, right? You can see the flooring doesn't change. It's just the tables where the county executive would sit would just shift up.
Scott, my understanding that the chair would sit and we're seeing the left,
Correct.
the left are.
The chair would sit at the head of the table, and the seating can still be thought about later on. If the chair so decides to have the county attorney sit on one side and the clerk and assistant sit, there's more tables, chairs there than you actually need if you counted them up. That's because we're looking at having them there. Now, if the chair so decides they don't want them to sit at the table or next to them, they can certainly push them to the ends of the horseshoe or push them to one of the two corners. It would be kind of the purview of the chair at that time to say, well, what do you want? Do you want your vice chair sitting next to you? Do you want the attorney sitting next to you? And all that. So
Podium would be the public podium we have right at the top.
correct. Yes, this podium would be the podium here. So when I come and do this kind of presentation now, I would most likely be standing at that podium, doing it at that point for the board. So any comments on this overall concept of, again, it does have flexibility of removing tables and chairs and all that kind of stuff as well.
Another question, I understood if I read through this, there will be outlets at each function here, so you could plug in laptops, you got a power outlet and so on, at each of the seated areas for the board supervisors.
Yes, that is the exact plan right now going forward. You would have the same voting system that you have in front of you right now, as well as you have outlets. I think the thought process right now, you would share an outlet, like a top outlet, bottom outlet, and then have two USB ports on that outlet. John is with CUNY Engineering, CUNY Architect, sorry. He can maybe explain the outlet situation.
Yeah, so each desk, so two stations will have one power port. So each person will have one power port and one HDMI cable input, and then also a Ethernet connection. So you'll be able to live connect Ethernet also.
IT is looking at going to computers instead of iPads to give you that a little more beef. So yes, there will be power there for you. Everyone would have access to that.
It'd be a USB import, not an HDMI. It's a USB.
Any questions on the overall boardroom layout or finishes? Again, we'll show you the video quickly too. Hopefully everybody had a chance to look at that. They did a great job of kind of a fly through here. So up on the screen, you'll see the video. So this is the proposed design, and then same thing you saw on your agenda. So this is proposed. It goes pretty quick. But you'll see the false ceiling coming down, again, acoustical tiles. I'll make sure that the speakers get moved around in the room appropriately. So this is going one direction, then obviously the other direction, kind of going back towards the podium and where the audience would sit. So again, going this direction, again, coming up in the county executive seats in there. You'll see the TVs as well, kind of put in the corners of the roomway to actually take a look at that. So everybody has a chance to look at the various TVs in the room. This is in the future when those couple desks are moved around. Again, the table will be moved around in the middle. Again, we're looking at refinishing the walls in here, not replacing them, but again, stripping them down and restaining them and varnishing them. Again, that middle ceiling is a drop-down ceiling, again, acoustical tiles to help with any noise that's potentially in the room, but gives the room a little more texture than just a flat roof.
Those screens are smaller than what we're looking at right now.
The TVs?
We actually talked today, we will be matching this screen that's here and putting that at all four corners.
Right.
And they'll be at that same angle there. We're going to match that setup exactly.
And we would be looking at potentially putting on something that's a little more movable and flexible. If you get it up there, you put it up there and going, oh, nuts, it's got to be moved just 3 degrees. We'd have that option too. So can I, if I can get a head shake, maybe that you like the way the direction that we're going with the room and the finishes. I appreciate that.
Looks good.
Oh, Supervisor Bossert, what do you think?
Looks good to me.
Yep, I'm all in.
The samples you provided just recently for the flooring that was gray. But everything else in here is kind of gold brown.
Yeah, and we incorporate that in the video, so if some of them you should saw, that's kind of a county standard in the palette. So we're trying to stay with that a little bit, but I don't know.
Yeah, those are finishes that we've used in other areas recently.
Even with all the color woodwork that we have in here?
So I just brought them, if you don't like them, we can come back with other options and certainly.
Color's not,
Yeah.
color's not set in stone.
Right.
Oh, okay, all right,
It's kind of conceptual.
all right.
You know, and from our perspective with facilities, we like to have fewer finishes than more, just because then we can keep good accent. But with this room, we want to make sure that it's aesthetically pleasing. So when we get down to really the big selection, I think they'll put together more of a whole complete finish board that'll have some of the finishes of the furniture and carpeting and baseboard and the walls and everything represented on tasting room.
Okay, all right, great, thank you.
Yeah, so the main thing, look at the material, not the color. That'll
Okay.
help too.
Right.
Thanks,
We're trying to get, yes, it's hard surface, soft surface.
sure.
Yep.
All right.
It's not, it's not clear from this diagram, but our nice seal is gonna be up in the front. Okay.
I mean, that, we,
Oh, okay.
for artists, yeah, for artist rendition, we put that one up in the front. Obviously, we didn't, finish out the whole room with all the pictures and stuff we want to put back up on the walls. So kind of look at it as more of the big conceptual, so you can actually visualize it. Some people might not be able to see a 2D plan and visualize it 3D, what it looked like going through. So think of it kind of as a high level look through the room and not this is exactly what it's going to look like at the final.
Thank you.
And onto the audio visual components of the roomway. We are looking at having the TVs, again, the voting, we're looking at having the same speakers in the ceilings. What we really want to talk to you about today and to get some positive direction in one way or another is how you want to broadcast your meetings in the future and record those meetings. In your packet, you saw we had a couple different options that were in there. Ashley, our clerk, has been working with our IT staff as well to identify different options that are out there. And when you see certain things out there, like the first one is a Swagat, doesn't necessarily be that firm. We would be looking at other firms like that firm, certainly, than other firms. So what it is that one of the options is called Swagat. Again, we could go with another vendor, certainly, but they provide more of a professional looking view at your meetings. When they'll focus in on you, they might have 6 cameras in the room. They focus in, they'll put your name underneath there, maybe your supervisor district when you speak, much more of a high quality. Certainly, if you want to take a look at some of their videos, our clerk can make sure that you have access to those for other counties that do that. But that's kind of I'll call it the higher end of the options. Again, we got some rough ballpark numbers of what that would cost in there. We could continue on like we do right now. We hire a contractor, currently West Bend Community TV, comes in there, records the meetings, but it's not really a live option. So then the clerk has to go through and does a YouTube and does a great job of a kind of a live streaming of the YouTube meeting, as if you will. That could certainly be our recorded copy too on there on YouTube, and removing West Bend Community maybe outside of that. So with that, this is something that's more near and dear to the clerk because her staff is one that is performing a lot of these duties. If she has any comments, I'm sure she'd be willing to share those with you.
Sure. So I can answer any questions that you have regarding the 3 options. Swagat was what we looked at when we first upgraded the technology in this room. And I believe Don, Jeff, and Chris maybe were the only ones that were on the executive committee when we talked about that. They're extremely professional. They would manage the entire system from their headquarters. So a firm similar to that we can look into. I'm not tied to Swagat. That's just the option we had looked at in the past. And at that time, several years ago, it was the only option really like that. But since COVID has happened, likely there's quite a few other options very similar to that also offer the live streaming portion. It is important to note that we would still need to provide Zoom so that supervisors can call in for committee meetings, which is currently the option that we're using to live stream to YouTube. We're using Zoom live streaming to YouTube. So it allows for individuals to call in and then also provides that live streaming option. And then with West Bend Community TV, I would recommend just for all of these three options, making sure you take a look at what they actually look like online to see the quality that we're putting out there to decide, if we're going to do this right now, do you want it to be the best option? Or, I mean, the YouTube version that we're doing now is very basic. West Bend Community TV, they do a great job, but they, as you've seen, have one camera in the room and swing it back and forth. And so, again, that's not live streaming. So it's just important to look into all options right now as we're doing this project, especially because we're completely reconfiguring the room. So I'm interested in any input that you have regarding those options.
You said when you got a price from Swagat several years ago, you got the estimates. Have you touched back with them to see if that's changed?
No, so I wanted to wait and see what you all were interested in doing. If you were happy, completely happy with what we're doing via Zoom, that cost is minimal. I mean, my staff, Mary, operates Zoom, or the other girls in my office operate it during committee meetings. And I believe we have a Zoom fee that we maybe pay through IT for the membership to utilize the service across the county. But so I wanted to see what your thoughts were first before pursuing another quote from an entity such as Swagat.
The Zoom meetings that I've looked at and when I've looked at on YouTube, it's been perfectly fine as far as I'm concerned. I would have a concern with, personnel. Do you have time to do it? You've been doing it, but
Yeah, so we've been doing it. It is fine now. I mean, there's been a few technology issues here and there, but overall it's been okay. We just end up doing it while we run the speakers and do the minutes. So it's kind of a whole thing that we end up working through. A lot more than we had been doing in the past, but it does work. The only difference between utilizing Zoom versus a service like Swagat is you're not getting your names at the bottom of the screen or your district. You would just be seeing your name plate or tent that would be by you.
okay.
I think it would be helpful, and I've participated remotely at a couple of meetings. If you're not familiar with who the board is and you really can't see who's speaking, I mean, you got a long view of a long room. I think it would be very helpful to have some kind of an ID on the screen as to who is actually speaking. I mean, when we're having a meeting like this, someone may get recognized from the chair or not. As an example, right now, when I came on, there would be nothing to say who is speaking. And I think that would be of a benefit to have as a feature. Now, whether or not we can do that with someone working remotely or whether or not we can do that here, I don't know. But I just think that would be a benefit to have, such that when someone is speaking, there's some kind of an identifier on the screen.
We can't do that currently here with what we're using as far as technology. It would have to be an entirely different system, and IT staff may be running it from a back room or something like that.
Having watched the videos numerous times, a lot of the different videos, I must say that, since we put in this new system, you guys have done a great job. And it really looks very good. The only obvious problem that I see is with the audio. So if we're not speaking into the mics, it's probably not clear. But I think that in the remodel, we can probably address that or just look at our policies on how we're doing things and make that a little bit better.
set up that way so you don't get the feedback from everyone else in the room. So it is very accurate with who's speaking. That's why we have it set up with having to have the mic on. A lot of the sound issues sometimes are the individuals calling in, and there's nothing we can do about that because it has a lot to do with their internet provider and service and where they're located and their technology that they're utilizing. So that's a lot on their end. So that wouldn't even be solved by switching vendors or anything like that. That really is just an issue with having people being able to call in.
And I see it as a cost benefit analysis type of situation. I don't really see a whole lot more benefit to going to a more advanced company to put my name on there for $15,000 a month, not really that important. I mean, while I understand that it is something good, and it probably might be helpful to our constituents, I just don't see it justifying the cost of such a system. When I really don't think at this time we're really our constituents are utilizing this all that much. I mean, it's not like we're getting thousands and thousands of
Sure.
hits.
Mhm.
We are not. So,
Yep.
and that's fine. I just think that the system is currently configured, a little bit reconfigured for our new room would probably be very good.
Okay. Yeah, and that's why we brought it to you all. I mean, it makes the most sense with completely redoing this room and having the conversation rather than adding it in after the fact.
Mr. Chairman,
Go ahead, Supervisor Mahalik.
thank you. I just wanted to ask regarding the visit that some of the folks from the county came to the city hall at the city of Hartford. We do have a multi-camera system. We have a person that's running it on the side. So they have all sorts of screens. They can do all sorts of different shots during the meeting. Are we going to have multi-cameras and available or an available individual, even with a Zoom meeting? From my understanding, because we run Zoom meetings and then have multiple cameras and just do the feed into Zoom, if that's something that we would consider. I think that would address something along the line of what Supervisor Mary brought up, which is then depending on where the camera placement is, and we can zoom in, zoom out, and we have our name plates in front of us, you would get some of what he's talking about, and you could still do it on a Zoom budget. There's not a larger monthly fee to my knowledge, but you do have the initial cost of putting in the camera, the Zoom, and having the board that can be run. But it's extremely well done. And, we're pretty thrifty in Hartford. We didn't spend a fortune, but it certainly looks like we did.
Just in regards to that, I don't have the staff that would be able to manage something like that specifically. I mean, right now we have 2 cameras. Mary runs both of them during the meeting, but she's also taking minutes, and to have it where you would be zooming in on individuals specifically in the boardroom, she can't do that. I mean, we would have to look to IT maybe to assist or having another full-time person just doing that for meetings. I mean, maybe not full-time, but just meetings in general.
Understood.
It would be too much for us.
Yeah, I understand that there would have to be a staff individual or maybe a couple of them trained so they could go back and forth, or if somebody wasn't available. But if it were an IT or even another department, I can't believe that it's overtly complicated. And I know that Mary has her hands full. And again, thank you, Mary, for Mary's short notice. You're always spot on when it comes to helping us with Zoom, which is just incredibly helpful to us supervisors. So thank you again for that, especially with this meeting. But we don't need a videographer once there is training, and I would imagine that it's going to take some time to get used to it. But boy, it makes a difference if you tune into any of our meetings. I'm sure that in a short amount of time, because I've seen it work, you go through and it might be 8 or 10 hours of training, which I think might be long, but you would be able to master it enough to run a meeting once everything was set up for you. It's, again, pretty intuitive.
County Executive, you Like chime in?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have actually watched a few Hartford meetings and several West Bend meetings. And I concur with Mayor Mahalik points about how how Hartford runs them. My question, and I think I know the answer to this, but I'm not positive. My question is that community television staff or dollars that are supporting that in Hartford? I know that's one thing, one difference between cities and counties, and in some cases villages, villages and cities. Mayor Mahalik, or Supervisor Mahalik, is that how it works where you're mayor?
It was in the past, but honestly, I don't know that we're really getting any type of money from them anymore. Things have recently changed, and we're certainly not going to step backward from what we're offering the community, because we believe that the quality is definitely worth what's done. Again, it's the initial spend. I mean, we got a lot of ARPA money floating around. This would be, I think, a small spend for something that would allow a real connection to the folks, especially again what Supervisor Mary's brought up, to make it such that it is watchable.
Well, I've had my staff spend $26 million 12 times over. This is the first time I've had a supervisor spend it. So thank you. That we've got a first. But the reason I asked the question is because I know that in the city of West Bend, their system is very much community TV funded, and it's I don't know if the enterprise fund or proprietary fund or exactly how they do it, but it's separate from the general fund. That I know. And so when you're comparing at least city of West Bend, and it sounds maybe not so much like city of Hartford, but if you're comparing city of West Bend's operation to what we're talking about, it's really apples and oranges. However, that said, the public, I think, has a certain expectation now because of that. And I think the question that the staff is trying to drive to is, do you want to meet that expectation or don't you? I think Mayor Mahal just outlined why it would be a good idea to meet that expectation. I think for us to be able to actually effectively do it, and I think this is why the county clerk came to you in the past with Swagat, for us to actually do that, Swagat is probably the model you want to go with and not try to, pardon the term, half-ass something. But if you're satisfied with what we've had, then that's fine. And that, I think that's really the direction. We're not going to be able to provide a quality product like Hartford has or like the city of West Bend has on the shoestring that we currently are operating on. That's the bottom line. So do you want to spend a little more money and get something nice, or do you want to keep operating on a shoestring?
So question I have for Scott, while I like watching Iowa, Wisconsin and see everybody pop up and their names for all the legislators and everything. Will that funding to at least install the system be covered under the CBDG grant, or is that going to be out of pocket money? I mean, we're looking at access, right? Part of the ADA is
Right.
create access for everyone, whether they attend or not, correct?
Yes, we work with our firm on that. We're efforting to move the cameras because we have to refinish the walls, because we have to do this. They're included to move the cameras. To add additional cameras would probably not be added, would not be into the grant. Do you know what I mean? So we got to refinish the walls, so we got to remove the cameras anyway, so we can move them wherever we want. Kind of like your desks, right? With the speakers, since we have to move your desks, now we can move these. We can't suddenly buy 30 more or get wireless ones or stuff like that. So I would say that if we did get additional 2 cameras, those 2 cameras would be on our dime most likely. And certainly if we went to Swagat system, would probably be on our dime. The way the grant is written right now would be my guess.
Where, like I said, I like the concept of having all the bells and whistles, I guess, and having, everyone be able to know who's speaking at every particular time. I'm relatively satisfied with what we have, working through the Zoom and working through our YouTube channel. I'm fine with that. I watch it myself when I rewatch meetings to make certain I said what I thought I said oftentimes. So I'm satisfied with what we have. I don't know that What was the cost of the Swagit? Back when you got it? Huh?
The rough estimate was 50,000 for installation a few years ago and 10 to $15,000 annually.
Annual,
Getting the board meetings for that, not all the
right, not all the
public
committee
works and
meetings.
all the committee
Right.
meetings. What was?
The quote that we had received included all committee meetings, except for it was different when we had them quoted. It was for this room specifically, and then also to install cameras in 2024 and operate all of those meetings. So the 10 to 15,000 that they had quoted us 4-ish years ago was for all of that. So we had an estimate of how many committee meetings we had a month, and that didn't account for going down in supervisors and any, reconfiguration of the committees. And then also county board. So it wasn't an astronomical amount more than what we're paying for West Bend Community TV, which is roughly $60 an hour. And that is just for county board meetings. They are not recording committee meetings. So, I mean, even if you were to have them man cameras here where they wouldn't be swinging their one camera around, it would be quite costly to even have that.
They work from a remote location, correct? Is that?
Swagit?
Oh.
Yeah, Swagit works from Texas. But so I'm assuming since COVID, because that was pre-COVID, there are probably quite a few other options we could look at this point. When we first looked, Swagit was one of the few that offered such a service, and even the live streaming option that they offered at the time was not heard of. It was rather new.
Okay, should we decide as a group here to explore other options that Swagit, or if there's some similar companies, and we decide not to do that and stay, how does that impact further? Does that impact the planning portion of it?
We have a month.
If we
Yes, we would have to work on it expeditiously with the county clerk. I'm not sure what her schedule looks like over the next month, but I would more point to her because she would help us kind of lead the charge on that and using her clerk's network and see what else is out there and available, and our IT staff as well to make sure it's compatible with what we currently have available to us right now as far as our technology in our building. So I would defer back. It'd be about a month because we want to get back here next month so we can, keep the ball rolling on this.
Yeah. I guess if we can do a 1-to-1 trade off from what we're paying specifically now for the West Bend.
I also had wanted to ask if you wanted to continue with West Bend Community TV in addition to what we're doing right now with Zoom.
I would say that I think it's time to end that relationship, as we discussed earlier. I think July was the date that we're talking about ending it, so this would be about the right time. I don't know, what does everyone else think the same way? That would give us just the Zoom and what you're looking at now on the screen would be going forward for our board meetings. I'm satisfied with that. Oh, sorry, Chris.
Ashley, have you received any feedback from the public regarding what they're looking at? Have they had any problems with it, since basically we're doing this for their benefit?
No, I haven't heard anything from anybody. I mean, having it live streamed to YouTube is great. I mean, because they stay there and they're very easy to look at after the fact. But we're not getting comments or traction. I mean, if it were maybe live streamed to Facebook, we'd have more input on the quality, or if they can hear things, or if they have questions or can't see what they want to be seeing. There just isn't that feedback on YouTube. And I haven't had anyone from the public email or call in either.
Okay. Supervisor Schleif?
My only addition to that is if we stay with YouTube, we should probably add another camera or two so that we get better coverage of the room as it's going to be configured.
We have the two now, and then we would probably have AVI or whatever designer take a look at what would work best for the room.
Thank you.
Okay, so consensus, anything from Supervisor Bossert?
Not at this time. Thank you.
Okay. General consensus then would be to discontinue our relationship with the West Bend television and continue with what we have right now. And then explore working with AVI to increase, possibly get additional cameras. And actually, we're gonna have to reconfigure the cameras anyhow, but so. And then remain on the YouTube, the way we're doing it now.
Mr. Chairman,
Is that general consensus?
Mr. Chairman, if I may, just for a moment, if you're discussing whether or not to discontinue the relationship with community TV as part of this overall remodel going forward, I think that's appropriate. But if you're talking about taking action or consensus on that as we sit now, I'm not convinced that that's really part of this particular agenda item. And I just, with caution that we not venture too far off topic. That's all, with due respect.
All right, we'll disregard the West Bend television at this particular time, but the rest of, do we have a general consensus? Can we have-
I would also caution that if we go to 3 or 4 cameras, Ashley said that, that's maybe too much for one person to handle, so we have to take that into account too.
I can't hear him.
Oh, you have to talk in the microphone, turn the mic.
If we do go to 3 or 4 cameras, Ashley mentioned that it was too much for one person to handle with taking the notes. So we have to kind of deal with that too.
Yeah, because during a normal meeting, if there's not 2 people sitting up here, they're also running the mic system when it's not a county board meeting. So any committee meeting, we're running the mics for all of you and then also running the Zoom and then also taking the minutes. So if there's just one person here, running more than 2 cameras is much too much work for one person to do all of that at the same time and make sure they're accurate with everything.
Okay, so I don't know, do we have that consensus moving forward? So that, right now, we're going to, I think you could probably explore the cost. And if it turns out to be a one-on-one trade-off, I think that's fine. Because we're already paying the money, so if we're not paying any more to get additional cameras and whatever, I think that's fine moving forward.
Just remember that West Bend Community TV at this time does not do committee meetings. So I could come up with a rough estimate of what it would be, but yeah.
Yeah, okay.
When you said $60 an hour, and I did some rough scratches, and if you do 20 hours taping a week, that's $1,200 right there, before you do anything else, so.
All right, do you have enough direction going forward now? Okay, we're good? Okay, great. Thanks, Scott. Next, our county executive with our great community presentation.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman, for the opportunity to present to Executive Committee on this concept of our great community. A couple of documents that I share with you, and Supervisor Mahalik and Supervisor Bossert, I just emailed these to you about 10 minutes ago or so. Pictures of the same. So flag me down if you do not have those. I'll draw your attention predominantly to the this piece of material with the Washington County logo on the top, because this is really kind of the foundation, if you will, of the concept that I'm seeking to pursue. I've touched on this with you at the retreat. with the exception of, I think, 3 county board supervisors. Everyone else was there to hear this pitch, at least in concept, kind of the thumbnail sketch of what I'm thinking. But this really begins to lay out, puts a little bit of meat on the bone in terms of what we're trying to do. And let me start by backing up and talking just a little bit about where this comes from. This is a little bit of trying to address what I believe are some national societal issues, maybe worldwide societal issues, at the same time as trying to think about creating a vision for Washington County for the future. We know that the county's been growing at a 1-2% clip for many, many years now, actually several decades now. And I think that's a healthy pace of growth where it's not overwhelming like you've seen in other places across the country, such as the second and third ring suburbs of Chicago, just as an example, where they get overwhelmed with the growth. But at the same time, it's really, if you demographically look at that growth, it really hasn't kept pace with what we need to, I think, be the thriving community that we hope to be. And so, especially in the next decade or two, I think what we're seeing with demographic trends is much of our county is aging, just like much of our state and much of our nation. And so this program in part is concentrating on that and what does the community look like and transform into over the course of the next many years. So it starts with kind of looking at some of those things and really looks deeper into what has driven our communities and really individuals to struggle in many ways that they have. The opioid epidemic is probably the most acute example of people turning to drugs and alcohol and other things like that. But it's all kinds of struggles that people have dealt with, not just here in Washington County, but again, across the country. And so I think Washington County is a great place for us to put together a program where we can not only promote and proliferate the values that have gotten us to where we are today, but also be an example for the rest of the country. We've done it with a number of programs that we have already. We've done it with our finances here in Washington County, and I think we can do it with our community at large. So what you see in front of you is really the skeleton of what I hope that begins to look like. And it really starts with our people and our kids, the next generation, if you will. I've talked to you in the past about some work that EDWC has been doing. If you recall, you supported providing some dollars to EDWC to do a housing analysis. I give credit to Mayor Mahalik and the team in Hartford Area Development Corporation for the work that they did, really to kind of get that off the ground. And really some of the concepts that you see here are peeled off from the discussions that started actually multiple years ago already with Mayor Mahalik and the team out at Hartford, but also with many others. And that housing study, while it started off from Hartford's perspective, at least, and specifically Hartford Area Development Corporation's perspective as a workforce initiative, really has evolved into a discussion about the next generation of Washington County. Our kids, yes, certainly, but the next generation of people who live here. And many of the people in the seats right in front of me right now, as well as those that are filled during county board meetings, weren't born and raised here. But chose to come here. And so the next generation of those folks as well, and that's what our great community is all about. What makes Washington County the type of place that people want to come to? And I think it's really predominantly 4 key things, and housing really being a centerpiece. That's why that housing analysis is so important. But ultimately, what creates the environment for authentic quality of life, in my opinion, is the networks of people. It's the individuals themselves coming together. And when there's a crisis, look at the Pearson family in Slinger, where both parents died, and the community is coming together to lift that entire family up. That doesn't happen just anywhere, but it does happen in a place like Washington County. It doesn't happen in every circumstance where, if you heard my State of the County address, a kid starts off in school and is raised till 12th grade and leaves, and finds a place back at home to be an attorney. That doesn't happen just anywhere, and it doesn't happen by itself. It's a network of people that ultimately bring that individual back, and that's what our great community is about. The housing market right now is extraordinarily hot, but really for the last decade, and I can tell you from firsthand experience, it's extraordinarily hot. But for the last decade, it's been like that. The cost of a house, average cost of a house in Washington County has been at or near $250,000 for a better part of a decade. If you're a new individual to Washington County making a healthy wage of $20 an hour, median household income, you're going to struggle finding housing in this county. And I'm not just talking about single family housing. I'm even talking about rent. If you can only afford about $900 a month rent, good luck finding a place to live in Washington County. And so those are some of the pieces that begin to formulate what I think we can do to help create that environment for authentic quality of life for the next generation, and what makes Washington County great and will make it great going forward. It's about our values today and tomorrow, and passing those on to the next generation. I think the best place to do that is with kids who have been born and raised here, who know what it is to be in Washington County. And when new folks come in, they're integrated into that. And I think we have a great opportunity to leverage that today. And I think our great community is a good starting point. So let me just walk you through this document. The first item you see there is a high quality education. And really what this is focusing on is there's already tools in place. County government doesn't need to get in the business of education. School districts certainly do that, and they have duly elected school boards. However, they've already got methods and systems and programs to help connect to kids and connect kids to careers and to colleges. It's more about coordinating and working together with school districts and students and parents and helping them not only identify colleges and careers, but maybe from our perspective, as importantly, or maybe more importantly, industries and businesses here in Washington County who one day they can work for. Not only can you be a tool and die maker, you can be a tool and die maker at Company X in Germantown, or Company A in West Bend, or Company C in Slinger. Not only could you be a carpenter, you could do that with this carpenter. You can learn from this carpenter here in Kewaskum or in Trenton. So it's about identifying kids early on and helping them find career paths and college paths that ultimately bring them back, and working with school districts to do that. I've had multiple conversations already with superintendents throughout Washington County, as well as the Workforce Alliance, which is kind of an informal group of business leaders and school district representatives starting to identify paths for the county to assist and facilitate that conversation, and hopefully extend it beyond 12th grade and bringing kids back to Washington County. Second is housing. I've touched on the challenges of housing in this market. But more specifically, let me drill down to exactly where I think the problem is. Hartford, Slinger, Jackson, Germantown, and West Bend have put a lot of time and money, maybe Hartford the most, into creating a high supply of apartments in the last 5 years, especially. And Hartford has really made this an area of focus. They've done it with housing generically, but there's especially been a lot of apartments. West Bend is not far behind. But what you find when you sit through some of the meetings and read through some of the packets is they're market-based apartments. And what that basically means is, generally speaking, you're talking somewhere in the $1,200 to $1,400 a month range. And to my comments earlier, that's out of the range of somebody making as much as $20 an hour, which is, over a $40,000 a year job. Now, and of course, if they worked overtime, a little bit more than that. But that means that predominantly the types of housing that we have and we have just created actually don't serve the people in the blue collar jobs that we say we want. Last month, you just capped off Economic Development Revolving Loan Fund for over $18 million to promote bringing even more industry in. And $20 an hour, Christians in the back of the room, $20 an hour is a heck of a competitive wage. If someone were to start there, they still would have a heck of a time trying to find a house in this county or an apartment in this county that they could afford, as I just laid out previously. So identifying how do we fill that void? We don't want to, government doesn't want to get into the business of housing specifically. We already know we have concerns about what Section 8 is. There have been elections where people have lost over WIDA funding and WIDA types of housing. But really specifically, how can we create the environment like our mission says? How do we help support creating a niche housing market and then get the heck out of the way? Let the private sector take over. Work with private sector developers. As a matter of fact, how do we do that very much like we do the same type of thing in industry? We do that through EDWC currently, through the revolving loan fund you just created. How can we replicate that same concept with so prosperous businesses and a prosperous economy with people, prosperous lives? Because ultimately, prosperous lives and strong social networks is what creates a great community and ultimately proliferates the values that I think we all in Washington County hold, and I think most Americans hold. And so housing is the second, and I think equally and maybe most direct thing we can do, and probably the first. In the coming weeks, we'll actually be rolling out the final results of the housing analysis, the next generation housing analysis that EDWC is completing. And we'll start talking about some of the specific data points, some of which I just referenced a few moments ago, but we'll be able to go into much more detail. Over and over again, the next item is employer connection. And over again, in the last several months, I have heard from employers unequivocally clear that they just can't find people, whether it's restaurants, downtown businesses, some of the strongest industries in Washington County, they can't find enough people. It's actually what drove the Hartford Area Development Corporation several years ago to start their big housing push. It's what drove Hartford Area Development Corporation ultimately to drive EDWC to do a housing analysis, which turned into a county-wide analysis. It's a serious problem that they need to address. And workforce is always something that we've been in the game in, at least in an ancillary way or a tertiary way through the Workforce Development Board, for example. But I think the better analysis, the better question is, how are we connecting these first three things of education, housing, and employer connection? How are we actually tying the work that educators are doing to actual employers? We're not creating machines. They're not creating robots. How do we actually educate kids to the professions that exist here or that will exist here? Wanting kids to come back to this community. The former superintendent in West Bend School District used to preach to kids at the end of their high school journey during graduation that they should come back and invest in the community that invested in them so much over the last 12 years plus. And yet we have struggled, not just us, but really the country, at connecting education to actual employment. What good is a degree in music if you're not actually going to go and perform music? My wife, as a music minor, would be an example of that, working in a bank now. So I think that, along with housing, is important, and having a conversation with our employers about how do we get kids into those employment places. I just did a tour of Regalware in West Bend, their West Bend plant, about 3 weeks ago now, and walked through their facility, but more importantly, sat down with their C-suite and talked to them about this exact challenge. Now, here's a corporation that 25 years ago, for those of you who are in this area, was a monster industry in this county and frankly in Southeast Wisconsin. 3,500 employees between Regalware and the West Bend Company, one of the biggest manufacturers of pots and pans and a variety of other things in the nation and frankly the world. Today there's 350 employees at Regalware, which is now combination of West Bend Company and Regal Air. There's been a lot of changes that they've seen. And now, for the first time in really probably a half a century at least, they're struggling to find people. That's a problem. That's a problem for us, not just for our economy, but it's a problem for our schools. It's a problem for all of our social organizations, our civic groups, our churches. That's a serious problem. And we need, I think county government's in a unique place to be a conduit, much like we do with EDWC, to help mitigate that problem. And finally, social capital. And I've touched on this a little bit already, but let me specifically talk to you about what I envision with social capital. Government is not going to be the solution to helping people in their time of need. It never has been, and it never will be. In acute crises, we can certainly help, whether it's our mental health services over at HSD, a variety of things that the county attorney's office often will step in and help with, the sheriff's department, and even sometimes at the end of life at a facility like Samaritan. But in those moments in time, like the Pearson family, it's not going to be government that's going to come and step in and solve the problem. So where is it going to happen? It's going to happen in our churches. It's going to happen in our Rotary clubs. It's going to happen in our Kiwanis clubs, and even the informal networks of people. That's where it's going to happen. That's where it is happening. How do we strengthen those ties that bind us together? That's where I think Washington County government can help step in and help. So ultimately, how do all of these things tie together? We are in the early stages of putting a thumbnail sketch to what exactly that looks like today and what type of actual programming can help be that conduit that I talked about a moment before. But ultimately, what I see is that we need to have a mechanism similar to what we've created with our site redevelopment committee, similar to what we've created with EDWC, and someone who can step in and help tie all of these disparate pieces together. Help give kids a path to how do you come back home? Right now, if you left when you're 18 years old, you graduate college, for example, and you come back, you can't buy a house here. You can't afford an apartment here. Short of making $75,000 a year, it's really hard to live here. How do we create a space where it isn't hard? And there's somebody who can help you find the job that will help you get the house, that will help you to get into the group, that will ultimately give back to the community. And when you hit hard times, that community comes back to help you. And when your neighbor is in trouble, you come in to help that neighbor. Government's not going to do it, but we absolutely can create the environment to do it. Right now, what I'm doing today and providing this information to you is just giving you a flavor of what it is that I'm working on in the next couple of months. By the end of August and early September, what I'd like to do is come to you with a few proposals for what it might look like to do something similar to what we've done with EDWC on Our Great Community side. I think we've got an opportunity. I think housing is probably the most acute crisis out of these three. I think education and employer connection, possibly some form of transportation or transit assistance, may be things that we investigate and look into over the course of the next several years. But tomorrow we can start the process of how do we make an impact in housing? How do we start to connect education? There's a short-term game and a long-term game. One where we need to help employers fill workforce slots now, and one where we need to build our community for the next generation and into posterity. The county board and Washington County as a body has an opportunity and I think an obligation to create the environment for that to happen. Whether it's a kid who graduated from West Bend High School or Rufus King, whether it's a kid who graduated from Kettle Moraine Lutheran or California Lutheran, it doesn't really make any difference. We want them here. We want responsible managed growth, but we need it in order to sustain our schools, our communities, and our employers. So I wanted to have the opportunity to present this to you today, to get your gears moving, to get you thinking about what are we working on, where are we going over the course of the next 20 years, and how can the county be part of the solution and not a hurdle or part of the problem, and what you might see in the next few months coming out of the county executive's office, including some potential asks. I'll end with this. I made a joke, obviously, with Supervisor Mahalik about being the first supervisor to ask for dollars from ARPA. But in all reality, I truly have had multiple asks, and multiple times over that money has been spent by staff. The reality is, at the end of the day, my focus is laser-like on how do we use those dollars in a way that give back perpetually. We have this unique moment in time where we have a financial situation in our county, as you all know, where we really never needed it. Actually, to the point where I called every congressman in the delegation, conservative congressman in the delegation, said, don't approve the bill because we don't need the money. Now we're sitting on $26 million. And the question is, how can we use it best to have a rate of return, not just financially, but that strengthens that tie that binds, doubles down on the values of Washington County and this great nation, and ultimately helps us solve workforce problems, but more importantly, solve societal problems, not as a government, but as a community. So with that, in the next few months, you're going to see proposals for programs, proposals for different types of projects that I feel like we can do, and ultimately funding that goes with it. Some of it ARPA funding probably, and some of it maybe not. I'll also be going across the county and talking to our partners in school districts, towns, villages, and cities across the county and sharing the same information with them. So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions you might have. Thank you again, Mr. Chairman, for the opportunity to present. Take it from there.
Supervisor Kelly.
Thank you.
Thank you, County Executive Showman, for that presentation. Obviously, we've spoke at length about this particular project in at least one aspect. My background is I used to work with my brother speculating on housing. We used to build houses. We built about 40 of them. Larger homes, some would say mansion-like. So I have a little bit of expertise in this area. And also I note that I am one of those $20 an hour employees that lives in West Bend. By the grace of God, I was able to find Wingate subdivision, which, if you don't know it, has two classes of homes, a tri-level or a ranch. They're very basic. They're very small. They're about 1,000 square feet, 3-bedroom. You've seen this ranch a million times if you've been anywhere in Wisconsin. Back in the early days of West Bend, there was major corporations here, Amity Leather, West Bend Corporations, Gell Corporation. And for builders, it was easy to build these small homes because they could build a lot of them, and they were very profitable because they were gabled ends, bildered carpets, classic, very easy cabinetry, no air conditioning, very basic homes. So they could turn out these homes for about $20,000 in 1974, which was a fairly decent price. And people could afford that. Person like myself, a middle-class, moderate worker, could actually afford that and raise children. When West Bend downsized its industry, I think the builders looked at this area as being more affluent, and the ability was to create more expensive homes where people could semi-retire, or people who were established could build and have larger lots, much bigger, more bedrooms, more bathrooms, all kinds of really wonderful amenities. And these became very profitable. And this is how we started building housing over certainly the last 25 to 30 years. The problem is now is we do have a resurgence of manufacturing, certainly in the last 15 to 20 years. And we have these jobs that are great jobs and they pay great money. You talk about Brown Corporation, Helgeson. I mean, there's tons. I could list them all day where you're making about 45 grand a year, like Josh said, just starting out. And that's really good money, but you can't buy a $350,000 home with a $2,500 a month mortgage. I don't make anywhere near that. I couldn't possibly afford that home. So what we need to get back to is the idea that you can have a home that probably has a more density, in a particular area, not quite so, large lots, smaller lots, basic homes. You have to make it possible for a builder to be profitable. I can't make a lot of money on a home, but I can build a lot of them. So that's where I can make up the dollars. So I think that's just a few things to think about when we're moving forward on this, is to consider my neighborhood. And I'd love for you to take a drive through it. It's Wingate. It's right over at this. You're in my district right now. And so if you go directly east and you go to the Piggly Wiggly and you turn north right in that area, you'll see all these homes. And these were all built in 1974. So they all have that moderate price. They were all built to say you got two different models. That's it. Very basic. And I think we can do something like that again, which would make these homes, they'd still be nice. They'd still be brand new homes. And imagine our children being able to live here rather than get shipped out to Milwaukee, where they can come home from college and raise their children right next door to your house or just down the street. So I think what Josh is getting to is a very exciting, and I 100% support that program. I live that program every day. So I hope to fully encourage you and help you in any way that I can to develop this. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Supervisor Kelly. And I'm glad you brought up a few different things, the employers being one and your specific subdivision being another one, because the type of subdivision. Because ultimately, if you look back over the course, really the last 75 years, this is not the first time the nation has found itself in this situation. Literally today, I gave a commendation to World War II veterans, Alan Kiefer being one of them. And Alan literally told me the stories about how when West Bend Company was struggling to find employees, they literally bought up land on the south side of town right behind City Hall, and they started plopping in homes exactly like you're describing and pulling people from the rural areas of South Dakota because they just needed workers that badly. And I'm hearing very much the same types of stories on the employer side of, we just can't find the bodies. We don't know where to get them. Years and years ago, they would go to different states. We're no longer a national economy. We're now an international economy. How are we going to solve this problem? So the first step in this process, and it's why employer connection is on there, is more conversations like I had with Regalware need to happen over and over and over. And employers need to be part of the solution. And they know this. Right now, you drive down the highway and you can see $2,000 signing bonus, $4,000 signing bonus, $1,500 signing bonus. We should be translating that into, you stay X amount of years, $2,000 down payment on your house or your condo, $5,000 down payment on your house or your condo, or paying off a portion of your student loans, or helping you buy the new truck, or whatever it might be. Those are the types of areas that employers can step in. So employers is number one. Number two, and tying it back to that concept with Alan Kiefer, I mean, to me, much of this is replicating or reviving post-World War II America, where everybody wants to help everybody else. And your kid coming back from Milwaukee, let's say they go to UWM or Marquette or Alverno or wherever, yeah, they're coming back. But just like Alan Kiefer did when he was at UW-Madison, he turns to person X and says, you know what I'm going to do when I get out of here? I'm going to go and sell bean pots for West Bend Aluminum Company. And his buddy says, oh yeah? I'm going to go to West Bend Company and sell bean pots. That exact same thing it sounds like a silly example, but when your kids come out of Alverno College or Marquette or wherever it is, and they hear about, you can get a house for what in West Bend or in Hartford or in Slinger, those school districts are amazing. How do I do that? Now we've got them coming with, and it doesn't matter if they're from Oak Creek or Milwaukee or Chicago. We don't care. We want them to come for the reasons that we're all here to begin with. And I think exactly what you're describing will replicate and revive exactly what we had 75 years ago. And Washington County will be the tip of the sword once again.
Supervisor Mary?
Yes, thank you. I agree with all your idealism here.
But I also live in Germantown, and I have a feeling you're going to have an uphill struggle against the city fathers who don't want to change that community. They want to have all their $500,000 homes, and they don't want any $300,000 homes. And how we're going to overcome that mindset in that kind of a local community, I have no idea.
Maybe someone should start talking to them
They don't want to hear.
2 months ago. Yeah, no, that's a great point, because at the end of the day, somebody was talking about the setbacks and the zoning requirements and the light poles and all, everybody has the same stinking mailbox, and that all has to be discussed. The municipality controls that stuff, not the county, and nor should the county dictate to them, this is how it ought to be. However, Germantown is a wonderful example. You can't build 4 giant industrial parks and not build places for the people to live. I have had these conversations with people in every community in this county, not just Germantown. And when you drill down and talk to them specifically, tell me where your first house was. And to a person, depending on the generation, it's a salt box, 1,000 square foot or less, condo or single family home with a whole hell of a lot of nothing in it that got them a little bit of equity to get them into the $200,000 1,500 square foot with an attached 2-car garage, which got them into the $350,000, which got them into the $750,000. That exact same process should be able to happen to everybody. And they shouldn't have to go to Wauwatosa, and they shouldn't have to go to South Milwaukee to ultimately get back here. Because a lot of times they never get back here, and we want them back here, and we want their friends to come with them. So when you get them to talk about them, it all changes, because everybody's story is very similar. An apartment to a condo, or to a really small salt box house, to the next size house, and ultimately you retire in whatever your vision of retirement is. So that's why I think when we talk about this, when we pitch it, it's about the next generation, giving your kids and those next people who came into this community like you did the exact same opportunity that you got. Nothing more, nothing less. You've got the same chance that Grandpa had when he came back from the war and he got a VA loan to help him buy that first house. It's the same thing. It's nothing different. Or the person who came to work for West Bend Company who helped get a piece of land for him to plop his home on. Same thing, nothing different. We're not giving anybody special treatment, but we're not holding anyone back either. So you're 100% spot on. And then we've got to get them to talk about zoning laws, which is a whole nother bailiwick. But nonetheless, I think when you put it in those terms, walls start to come down because it's their story. And it's really hard to fight against your own story.
Any comments from Supervisor Bossert or Mahalik? All right.
Well, I have to say first, Josh, thank you very much for the plug. I appreciate that. We've been working on this for quite some time in the city of Hartford. We realize that a sub $200,000 home is really where you need to be if you're going to have somebody earning $20, $22 an hour, maybe a spouse that is working for about that, maybe a little less, or maybe part-time because they have a child or children. And that really is where you need to start. We do have some older home stock, as I'm sure West Bend does too, where you have $160,000, $180,000 homes that come up on the market that are older homes. Not really a fixer-upper, but a home that's got some wear. I mean, 80, 90 years old, those do come up, but we don't have enough of them. The turn isn't there because, interestingly enough, with some folks, they don't want to move out of the home that they've raised their kids in, and that which is one of the reasons that we've built a number of condos so we can take some of the people that are in those homes who are getting to the point where they don't want to shovel snow or cut grass anymore and move them in so they can stay into the same community, and then open up that single family home to start a new generation. So these are some of the things that we're working at. But what really was the gut punch for us, it was really a 1-2, and that was with the Wuhan coronavirus coming through and really stomping things. And then, of course, what happened was the tripling of the price of lumber and on all of the ridiculousness that happened. That kind of froze us in our tracks for the short term. That doesn't mean we stopped. It means that we have to reconsider and wait for the market to settle down and get through whatever it's going through right now, so we can reattack, if you will, what is a nagging problem, and that is to have housing. We don't call it affordable housing because with that, oftentimes there is the connotation of government stepping in and making partial payments and having all sorts of ridiculousness. What we're looking at is what we call workforce housing. And workforce housing is housing that can work for the existing workforce. We will continue to do that. I believe that the smaller lot, a nice home, and a house that has potential. Even when we bought our home, I know that a couple supervisors here have given examples. When we bought our home, we didn't have a patio in the back. Why? Because I didn't want to borrow $7,000 more to do it. Okay, and we waited until we could save up, and we put a real nice patio in after the fact. We were in our home for years before we did that. And I think that a lot of the people, a lot of the youth understands that you can do what you want in an incrementalism style, as long as the potential is there to do some nice things with your home down the road. That's really what you do. You buy what some people would say a starter home, but I don't think a starter home is necessarily a pejorative. I believe that it makes more sense to buy something that has that potential, and then as you can afford it and you work up, you can add the things to really make your house a home, if you will, and add the things that you want. Personally, I don't know that I would go as far as Supervisor Kelling and get a house with no air conditioning, but I would have, that's one of the things I would toss in. But there are other things that can be pushed off and make the house as affordable as possible. We're going to continue to work on this. I'm proud to work with Josh and any other community that's also looking to move that as soon as the housing plan comes out. I know Christian Cheslock and the EDWC has done, I'm sure, yeoman's work on this, and I'm very anxious to dig into it and see, again, once the market settles down, how we can move forward. Thank you.
Thank you. No further questions. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, I want to move the SEDS discussion resolution forward. If you gentlemen from SewerPAC could come up. What I'll do is I'll have you first introduce yourselves, and then I'm going to make a brief statement. And everyone has pretty much gone over the document with a fine-tooth comb. You're going to have lots and lots and lots of questions and concerns about the document. But go ahead.
Sure, I can start. Chairman, members of the committee, supervisors, thank you for having us. I'm Kevin Muse. I'm Executive Director for the staff of the Regional Planning Commission.
Eric Lind, I'm Chief Special Projects Planner for the Regional Planning Commission staff.
Okay, great. We talked a little bit earlier, County Executive Showman's vision of a great community is kind of our whole platform moving forward. Now, I read from your document, purpose of the SEDS. Purpose of the SEDS is to bring together members of the public and private sectors to develop a strategy-driven plan for regional economic development. Now, I know you guys are just the messengers, and I want everybody to realize that much of the politics and the political statements throughout that seem to just permeate this document are not their doing. It's kind of standard brought forward. But one of the things for our great community in Washington County is we've got thousands of jobs that have gone unfilled in our county. In the southeast Wisconsin, there's tens of thousands of jobs that have gone unfilled. There's an untapped resource in the city of Milwaukee for workforce. And with our workforce development, if we get our housing, there'll be a reach out for not only a workforce, but to bring workforce to our community to make us more diverse. The equity lens is troublesome for me because I'm all about equality of opportunity. Everyone should have the opportunity. Everybody should reach out. I look to the Joseph Project that Senator Johnson worked along with members and of the churches and nonprofits in the city of Milwaukee to create jobs, get people that haven't been in the workforce, either been unemployed or underemployed, and look to them to try to create a job for them so that they can build equity and not look at racial equity. Color of your skin shouldn't matter. We're all human beings. We're all children of God. We're all brothers and sisters. And that's where I have the most, this document so problematic with the politics involved with it. Equity of outcome unfairly lifts up one section of the community to bring down. And we know what's happened with No Child Left Behind. What we have is we've gone from being in the top 3 in education to below third world countries because we don't push our kids. We don't encourage them to succeed. We have to wait for the people that are the low achievers and keep everybody else down. And that's what I think a lot of the politics of this is within this document. We all need that opportunity. We all need to be equal. We are all equal in God's sight, and that's the way it should always be. With that, I'm going to open it up for questions from the executive committee, and feel free to, when you're answering, if you get your presentation, if you need to have it up, feel free to do that. We also have Christian Teschlock here from EDWC, and feel free, Christian, to interject when you feel necessary. Okay, we'll begin with any questions anyone has. Supervisor Mary?
I've got a number of comments I read through for all purposes, the entire document, and I'm going to reference some pages that are pages of the document, not necessarily allied to the pages we have on our forum here. On page 19, it says Goal 1, Unity, and I'm trying to define equitable. I cannot agree with equity and economic resilience statement. To me, I think it's politically driven. There's one reference on page 20 that EDWC really endorsed this program unanimously. We don't like it because it's political, but. And then on pages 25, 26, 29, 32, 36, 47, 96, 100, 108, continued references to racial and ethnic disparities. I have a problem with some of this. And on page 56, is Milwaukee, this area really the most segregated in the nation? I mean, is this a truism? I mean, it's presented that this is a fact, that this southeast Wisconsin is the most segregated part of the United States. And I can't believe that's true. On page 93, we talk about the lack of political will or support to invest in a regional transportation system. But yet countless millions were spent on a train in downtown Milwaukee that goes round and round to nowhere, taking citizens to jobs while bus routes taking citizens to jobs have been cut because of budget shortcomings. How many jobs could have been created in Milwaukee for the cost of the millions of dollars went into that train? And I guess I have a problem with the heavy emphasis here on Milwaukee, Milwaukee, Milwaukee. Page 117 and others, a continual discussion on disparity in education. Yet we have a state government that is disdainful of school choice options for students from inner city to come to the suburbs and gain useful career building skills. Page 124, lack of political will or support to invest in regional transportation system, yet the state government promotes CRT in classrooms. And then unfortunately, on page 143 of the Washington County Summary, Germantown is sadly absent. But I'm sorry, I just have some problems with this entire document. There's too much political, too much equity, and racial disparity. I don't see it, and I can't support it. I'm sorry. Thank you, sir.
Any other comments? Supervisor Bossert?
All right, thank you. I'm going to be a no vote on this. I always support economic development, but there's way too much politics in there. And all of that politics is being driven towards an agenda I can't agree with. You know, whoever was involved in putting all that in there, they basically poisoned the well, and then they ask for regional cooperation. If you want regional cooperation, you can't try to force us to swallow a poison pill. So I'm going to be a no vote on this. I also want to bring up all this talk about disparities in education. The biggest disparity is MPS, where they have schools where not even one kid can read at grade level. What did MPS do during COVID? They just completely shut down and stopped teaching kids, furthering that divide, which is shameful. It's shocking and abhorrent. And there's need for massive changes in Milwaukee. In MPS, we need charter schools because charter schools actually teach kids. So I'm a no vote on this. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other, before I get into mine? Okay. Yeah, equity again. When we talk about lack of educational opportunity for a city of Milwaukee and the underprivileged persons of color, the MPS spends over $15,000 per pupil. My school district, Holy Hill School District, spends $11,000 per student and has far greater outcome. How do we get into the communities that populate MPS and emphasize the importance of education? Because we have teachers, we have good teachers in MPS. We have good equipment. We spend enough money on it. We don't have an outcome. But it's not an equity issue. It's not even an equality issue. It's a participatory issue. And how, I know you don't address that in the document, but that, to me, number one in education is you have to have students that want to go to school and you want to learn. And how do we turn that culture around and get kids back to school? Because here in Washington County, if you have a heartbeat and can come to work, you will be hired. We want you to come here to work. And if you accumulate enough equity, you buy your own transportation, you create more equity, you start looking at, let's get an apartment closer to where I work. You continue to build your equity. Let's buy a house. And that's what we're talking about in our great community, to get those houses built that people can come and have what we used to call starter homes when I was a kid. We get our starter home, and you continue to build equity. That's what equity really is. Equity of outcome really flies in the face of equality. I mean, we want everyone to be equal. So, and I know this is coming down from on high, coming down from the federal government, that this verbiage needs to be in the document. But again, it runs counterintuitive to what it would take to become a successful, functioning human being that's a positive for society. So it's a culture we have to overcome, understanding that education first, you get that degree, even if it's a GED, just get your high school diploma and you can go wherever you want to go. We have a crisis coming up in Washington County. Our manufacturing base of workers, over half of them are age 55 or older. We already have thousands of jobs that are open, And in the next 10 years, we're gonna have thousands more that are gonna be open. In manufacturing, anything in the trades and manufacturing, those are really, really good paying jobs. And you know what? You come here, we'll train, we'll give you money to start and, you know, just come into work, do the job and we'll do everything for you. So, I mean, and we are reaching out beyond our borders, not only to bring our kids back and their friends, but we want to bring people, we want to look at the disadvantaged. We want to look at people that are underemployed or unemployed and those that want to make a better life for themselves, we welcome them. And that's kind of where we're at in this whole situation. And, you know, I think Josh talked about everybody. We want anyone to come. And we do. And I think the document here actually it promotes racial divide. I mean, doesn't matter what color our skin is, we're all the same. You know, and the more we talk about race, one of the things from CRT, critical race theory, that I actually agree with is that race is a social construct. All right. That's a social construct. You know, kids growing up, they're put in a playground. They don't know what color the other person is. They're just another playmate. By society, we have built this up. And I think documents like this, when we become overly politicized, we actually make that chasm even deeper. So I've made a statement on the committee report that we do not support this document based on that. And I hate to throw out the baby with the bathwater on this one, because there's a lot in this document that is really good that I really agree with, but it's polluted by politics. And to me, to make a stand, to say we need to just do what is necessary. I understand that we have underprivileged. I understand that we have underemployed and unemployed, and people need a leg up and need some help to do it. And we're more than willing to work with everybody and anybody to get them ready, and work with nonprofits and the faith-based community to help that happen. But you know, this document, I can't support it because of that. That's where I'm at. Christian, did you have or which?
Do you mind if I know? Mind, Mr. Chairman?
Sure. And I do have some comments too, but. Okay.
Can I just ask some fundamental questions first about, can you explain to us SEDS and why specifically you're asking Washington County to actually approve this?
Sure, yeah. So, and thank you, County Exec and Chairman and committee members for all of your comments. I really appreciate, first of all, how carefully you read it, because that doesn't always happen with reports that come out of the Regional Planning Commission. So, and certainly recognize all of the perspective you provided, and yeah, very much take that to heart. So the SEDS is a little bit unusual for a Regional Planning Commission document in that it is short range but regional. Most of our regional efforts are long range, and that's you know, kind of our main task under state statutes. And then, as I think many of you know on the committee and the board in general, we help as needed on short range things with specific communities or counties upon request. And so the reason this is unusual is because it is designed to meet requirements from the Economic Development Administration, which is a department of a part of the U.S. Department of Commerce. And so this document does need to be updated every 5 years. What it does is it makes areas within the county, and Eric, maybe pull up a map of the distressed areas.
Can I share my screen?
Yeah. Yeah, that's probably the most useful part of this slide deck. So what it makes is when it is adopted by a county, it makes areas of economic distress, and these are updated every year by the EDA. And it's based on unemployment rates and per capita income within these areas. And those are what are kind of tealish on the map. It makes areas of economic distress projects in those areas that might attract or retain jobs eligible for some grants from the EDA. And those grants are for public works, or they can be for strategies or planning or other things like that. And so currently in Washington County, there's obviously a part near and within Hartford, then also within West Bend. I will say pre-pandemic, there were no areas of economic distress in the county based on these metrics. So it does change with some regularity. So that would be the opportunity that would be foregone. It is a relatively limited opportunity within Washington County. And so I don't want to overstate that. So many of these districts are obviously in Milwaukee and then also in Racine and Kenosha counties. That is where most of the distressed areas are. And those are the areas that would primarily be eligible for these grants on a wider scale. So I guess did that provide the context you were looking for, County Executive?
Yes,
And
that's
then
helpful. Thank you.
as far as the document itself and how it was developed, the document was developed through working with M7, the Economic Development Organization for the entire region. There was coordination with the Regional Economic Partnership, which Christian sits on from EDWC. But as has already sort of been stated, there are specific requirements or at least expectations of certain things being included within the document to meet the federal expectations to qualify for those grants. So that is at least some of what you're discussing is very much attributable to that. So.
Could you also explain to us, so I understand why we're being then asked as part of the region to adopt, but what are the consequences of approving and not approving?
Sure. So approving in the immediate future is just local governments or other entities that serve or would have a project within those two economically distressed areas that I talked about would be eligible for EDA grants for the next 5 years as part of this SEDS. Longer term, there has been discussion in the past about the region becoming an economic development district, which does broaden eligibility. It doesn't necessarily bring us a ton more money. There's a little bit more money, less than $100,000, sorry, but a year. But it does broaden the eligibility to projects that can be connected to helping economically distressed areas and people within the economically distressed areas. So that does broaden the eligibility certainly to many more parts of Washington County. We've already kind of talked about Germantown's business parks. West Bend has plenty of developments going on. Hartford has plenty of developments going on, others as well. So those sorts of things might then be eligible, but that is a separate designation that you need the SEDS to pursue. As far as what could happen today if the determination is that the board is not going to, well, the committee first and then eventually the board, that this is not going to move forward, I guess is what I'll say. If that's what's determined today or in the future, essentially for now, it would just be foreclosing that opportunity, which may be small for investments in that Hartford and West Bend area and then in those areas. But then in the future, we would probably want to come back and talk if an economic development district was being pursued to see if there was a more regionally palatable approach that could be pursued if the district is something that everyone is interested in. We would probably follow the lead of the regional economic partners, so Christian and his peers, on whether or not a district is something that we want to pursue. I will say it's not even clear that the Regional Planning Commission is the right house for that district. It might be some other organization as well, but that's something we're available to do if that's what the counties want us to do. So.
And could you speak to how this is going in other counties, if you have any idea?
Yeah, we have presented it in I think in all 6 counties now. This is our last introductory meeting. Yeah, and so it's been in front of committees or some counties like your neighbors to the east do a full board presentation, then a committee, and then a full board vote in succession. So we were just at the full Ozaukee County Board meeting this morning to present this. There have been some limited concerns, I will say not as strongly as were expressed here about some of the things that were mentioned. I know Waukesha County is moving forward a resolution where they accept the document and talk about the parts of the document that they're going to integrate into their comprehensive plan the next time they update it. That's how they're moving forward with the process. Other counties in the region, okay, one county in the region, didn't feel like we went far enough, so we did get some no votes there, but that is still moving forward. We had a majority. The others, generally, it's maybe they didn't read it as carefully as you did, but it hasn't been an issue really one way or another. So
Thank you.
Could you go back to the map real quick? That area in Milwaukee that's in the green?
Yeah.
We want to help eliminate that.
Yeah.
That's our goal.
Yeah.
To draw people to us from those areas, no matter what their color is.
Sure. Yeah.
Without the equity, the racial equity lens applied to it.
Mhm.
So we just want people that want to come here, enjoy our authentic quality of life, and which is, by the way, Washington County has the #1 quality of life of all the counties in the state of Wisconsin. So a lot of stuff to do here, a lot of things, people come here, live here, spend their money here, be part of the community, and integrate our community.
Yeah.
That's what our goals are.
Yeah, and I will say, Chairman, if I may,
Sure.
that when I was listening to the county exec's presentation, it was one of those 99% of what he said is in here, and 80% of what's in here was in what he said.
Mhm.
And so there is a lot of commonality without acknowledging the previous comments, but I just was struck by how much alignment there is, and we should have a conversation in the future. Maybe some ways the Regional Planning Commission can assist with some of those efforts, because I think those are really important efforts for the region, including for many reasons, but including the reason you just mentioned, Chairman.
Right. So, thank you. Christian, did you have?
Yes. Thank you. It's worth noting, take a meta moment here and look at the conversation we're having. It's not about the planning elements of this document and the regional ways that we can collaborate to advance the objectives that we have in Washington County. Nor is it about the county's leadership in economic development and how we have driven forward and led the way as it relates to how you can execute successfully on a development mission. Our conversation has been necessarily about the revised document and the way that it has brought politics into all of those otherwise very material discussions and opportunities that are present in this document. I'd like to make clear that the plan that the EDWC board and unanimously supported is not the one that is in front of you. And we, once we did share that with them, they expressed concerns regarding of a similar nature to what you have shared. That said, they also felt it was very important to underscore the sound and extremely solid planning elements and how there is an opportunity to leverage those to advance the mission of not just EDWC's economic development efforts, but the great community efforts that you just heard about. The board and I personally also concur with the strong objection. And if you took time to absorb the letter that I sent, that letter made very clear that while the board supported unanimously the planning elements, we do object to and concur with your concerns regarding the politicization of the document. I'm certainly not a politician, but I can give you a pragmatic view. And this is a concern that is material and relevant as you consider how you want to position Washington County respect to the SEDS. You can, and EDWC can, control how we execute on this SEDS plan. There is nothing in the SEDS plan that mandates or affects how we execute on a strategy that we not only know to be successful, but has demonstrated success and leadership within our region. What you can't control is the politics and messaging once it leaves this room. There is the very real potential for unintended consequences of misperception, misrepresentation, exaggeration of your viewpoints and your concerns once it leaves this room in a way that can and potentially would affect the development opportunities that are right now sitting on our doorstep. While the region is adopting a plan, you are executing on a strategy. You are right now executing on a strategy that creates opportunity for all who want to work hard, irrespective of their backgrounds, their family's past wealth. This is a county that embraces everyone who wants to work hard and contribute to their community. We do not want to create noise that disrupts the good work of this county and the vision that you and our county executive office has set forward, which is, as was just earlier noted, powerfully inclusive of many of the issues and values that are representative in this document. If they want to make it political, the proverbial we don't have to bite. Nor do we want to create cause for the private sector due to the lack of ability to control the message once it leaves this room, to have to react in the development space, particularly in the negative. There is little pragmatic effect to approving the planning elements while sharing your disapproval of the politics. While there is material and political developmental risk to the message that you can't manage once it leaves here, including an outright decline and how that might be represented in the public space. Hence CDWC's approach, and in our letter to recommend qualified support, which to be clear means that you do not support the whole document. You're providing qualified support that accepts the planning components while makes clear your objection to the politicization of the SEDS document and process. And be happy to address any questions beyond that, but thank you for the time to share that.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. In looking over this whole document, I really have and share the concerns of my fellow supervisors, and was fully prepared to just basically throw this document out on its ear without comment. But I will say this, Mr. Cheshire is probably one of the smartest people I've ever met when it comes to this kind of thing, planning and otherwise. And I have just the utmost respect for this man. And I wonder if it isn't prudent that we qualify this document and put it through to the board. Because like he states, and there's really a lot of sense to that, I don't think the Journal Sentinel's really going to care about what you said here today. They'll be sure to misquote you no matter what. And that's where my great concern is, that the businesses that we're currently getting ready to do business with that are waiting out there in the wings, and there are some big projects, that they will basically look at what the Journal Sentinel says and go, you know, maybe that's not the kind of county we want to do business with, when actually it could be quite the opposite. So I would implore this committee to think about this and consider putting forth a qualified decision towards the county board of this document. Thank you.
I'd like to thank everybody for their comments. I think we're kind of all on board with this. Christian, I agree with what Dennis just said. I think you're really good at what you do. Maybe the smartest man in the room, except for the county executive. But when I read your letter, I didn't get that that was a qualified approval. I was kind of confused, but now that you've explained, I like it. I'm in agreement.
Supervisor Bossert or Supervisor Mahalik?
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. First, I want to thank Supervisor Bossert for, I think, spelling out what I think are the concerns of those of us who read through it and then read the letter from EDWC and have some real concerns. Listen to the county board chair, Chairman Creefall. It's a lot to bite off. I like the question that County Executive Showman asked, and that is that, you know, what is the concept as far as how are we affected by this SEDS document? I mean, I'm reading the slide right here, intended to increase job opportunities and that, but there was a slide before, and that was right, what it takes, what the adoption ensures that the county and local governments remain eligible for EDA grants. Well, those of us who have a vested interest specifically in West Bend and Hartford are interested in making sure those EDA grants are accessible, because that's one of the things, obviously, as responsible government representatives, to make sure that the amount of money available from the government is there to help. But then you have to go back to what County Executive Showman brought up, but at what cost? I mean, there is a cost besides the money that you lose if you don't do this. I would explore a qualified, using the term that's been batted around here, qualified approval of what we believe is the proper meat of the documentation that's been presented for us, minus the politicization of equity versus equality. I've never been a believer, and will go to my grave believing that the outcome being even versus the opportunity being even is radically different. And I believe in equal opportunity. I am radically opposed to equal outcome. And I think that that's really what equity represents, is that outcome equality. There are other words for it. You can call it socialism, Marxism, all that, when supposedly, we want everybody to be the same. No, I don't want everybody to be the same. I want people to have the opportunity to excel so they can be better. And I don't think that some of what's in this document actually purports to support that. I think it pollutes, using that poison pill, which Supervisor Brossert brings up. I think it does taint this to a degree where, at best, I would support a qualified endorsement. Obviously, with Christian Cheslock speaking to that, I would be very interested in seeing what that looks like. Given that, Chairman Creefall, I mean, I would, before we would, if we have to take a vote on this, I would move to table it in order to be able to see what a qualification of this document would look like prior to advancing it to the board.
I would second that. And I was actually just thinking about exactly that we put this off for a month, and then we look at what would this qualified support mean.
Okay, in the resolution itself, it is worded in such a way that adopting the strategies only and not adopting the entire document. That was written by County Attorney Stern for that specific purpose. Good.
There was a second. I'm not sure that that there was a first motion.
Mr. Chairman, I'm motioning that we table. I am not comfortable, given the discussion that's here. I would want to have a deeper dive, if you will, or a further explanation between Christian Cheslock and Brad Stern, putting their heads together and saying, okay, let's really dig into this.
Chairman, if I can interrupt at this point, once the motion to table is seconded, there's no discussion.
Correct. Okay, thank you.
So we can't continue to discussion this until we vote on the motion to table.
Okay.
Correct. And the correct motion would be a motion to postpone. So we can't
table it actually
anything.
kills it, correct?
Correct.
No?
Yes, unless it's picked up again tonight.
Okay.
So in
Motion to
in
postpone.
essence, what you've
So
discussed, it would kill
you're-
it.
You're looking for a motion to postpone? action.
Correct.
So we need to address the motion to table first and then go back
Okay.
to any other
All right,
motions.
well, since it's been, is there any further discussion on the motion to table?
Well, if I withdraw my motion to table because it would have to be taken up later today, why don't I just withdraw that?
Can you withdraw it or we have to take action on it, right? Yeah, we'll have to, yeah, it's been seconded, so we have to take action on it. All in favor of tabling, signify by saying aye. Any opposed? Nay. Nays carried.
No, I can't hear you, Don.
Sorry, my mic's on. We just, the motion, take the vote on the motion. Motion to table, for those on Zoom. In favor, signify by saying aye. Opposed, signify by saying nay.
Nay.
Nay,
Okay, I'll entertain another motion to postpone.
So moved.
But before we do that, one question, postponing the vote. Does that, how does that affect the SEDS going forward?
I think we have the room for one more month cycle. So the commission, I mean, if we have to delay, we have to delay. But right now, the commission is scheduled to consider this on, I think it's September 16th, which I believe is off after your September county board meeting.
Wonderful.
Okay, yeah, that would work then.
I believe so, yeah. if you
Okay.
can-
All right, I'll entertain that motion to postpone.
So moved.
second,
Okay, any
You have to postpone it to a date certain.
dates are
Next county board meeting
next executive.
or next executive
committee meeting,
August 18th.
August, I think it's August.
18th. I'm looking at the agenda.
All right. Any discussion on that? Seeing none, all in favor, signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay, we're postponed. Thanks, gentlemen. Sorry that you had to face the ire and wrath. It's not your fault. And we understand that you guys from Sewer Pack do a great job for us. And we're appreciative of the work that you do. And your hands are tied on this one. But sometimes you got to stand up and, say what's right. Martin Luther King Jr. said, time is never wrong to do what's right. So,
I appreciate the discussion and the opportunity to speak. And I just, if I may, want to thank Christian for his navigation of this very challenging situation. So,
Christian, will you be able to attend our executive committee meeting? And
We will make it a point.
okay, and we'll discuss it at greater length going forward. And see where it takes us. All right, can we take a quick 5-minute break?
thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Fudge. You're such a silly fudge. You're such a silly fudge.
We're back in session. Next on the agenda is property tax relief fund for discussion.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman. And again, you'll notice this is just a discussion item. And really what I'm asking for is your blessing on a concept and asking ultimately the county attorney's office to begin drafting a resolution in the spirit of this discussion. So as I think most of you will recall, several years ago, the administrative committee adopted a fund balance policy that laid out how much we would maintain in our fund balance that didn't exist before I was county manager. I don't think it existed before I was county administrator. But anyway, the point being, that policy established, and I'm going off of memory here, so Aaron Dahl and Margie Hammers are here to correct me like always. I believe it established a policy where 12 to 16% of total general fund spending on an annual basis could be held in undesignated fund balance. Did I get that right? Man, that's pretty good. So that has been our policy for several years now, and it applies to numerous funds, general fund being the most important. Today, we sit in a position where our fund balances are very healthy, as you know. Over the course of the last many years, we've worked really hard to build that up. Today, that unassigned fund balance is at $18.1 million. That's about 5.8 to 8.8 over our policy. So our policy is that range of 12 to 16%. That's where the 5.8 to 8.8 comes in. What I'm proposing with the property tax relief fund is similar to what you've done historically with the revolving loan fund or previously the jail reserve fund. First of all, I propose establishing a property tax relief fund. What I would suggest is that 5.8 number to be conservative. We take that $5.8 million and we designate that 5.8 or something close to it into this property tax relief fund. Okay. I subsequently would recommend then that we, on an annual basis, at the end of our audit, we determine how much surplus we had in the budget year, assuming we have surpluses, and about 80% of the time we do every year since I've been here. But at the end of that year, if we have a surplus, those surplus dollars go into that property tax relief fund. Sometime thereafter, what I would then suggest is if that property tax relief fund gets to a certain dollar amount, we automatically use that to offset property tax levy. Or you could potentially, and this would obviously be debatable, it's a policy, it's not a mandate. In other words, you're adopting it by resolution, meaning any future board can change it with another resolution. But it basically is an automatic mechanism to staff to say, when you get over, let's just say $7 million in the property tax relief fund, the rest of it must go to offset property tax levy in the coming year. Across the board, it's going to cut it that much that year. That will allow us to cut the levy, most certainly. It'll allow us to give people back the money that we've been overtaxing. And I'll put that in the context of 8.8 million on a $150 million budget is not, relatively speaking, that much money. Nonetheless, it's not our money. So with the existing tax levy laws the way they are, if we make that cut and the following year we decide, hey, we really need that levy back, we can increase the levy to what is, the term is called claw back that levy amount. So it essentially becomes a one-time cut into the levy. And in theory, your property tax relief fund has money in it for a period of time. At any time, the board can say, we don't want it to be 5.8 or 7. We want it to go down to 2 because there's a crisis or we have a project, just like you're doing later on in this agenda with the jail reserve fund. You can change that designation anytime you'd like. But for today's intents and purposes, the concept would be, this is a mechanism to help you cut taxes perpetually and give people back their money through a tax levy cut in the future. I've had this idea for some time. We've talked in previous occasions about other ways to give the money back, if you will, such as property tax refunds. They're very laborious in nature for us to execute. And sorry to use this term, but you can't equitably disperse them because of how property taxes function. You kind of forget about things like personal property taxes, the different types of designations like agricultural uses versus industrial versus residential. So it's overly complicated to do that. You don't end up sending a check to every family like you would think you are. So I think the easiest thing to do is to create a fund of this variety, to give ourselves a mechanism to cut future taxes, and ultimately still have the flexibility at a resolution level of the board to be able to be flexible and spend that money elsewhere if you feel the need to do that at some point in time. So that's the concept. I wanted to share it with this committee, ultimately hoping that we can implement sometime in the next several months via formal resolution back to you and ultimately to the county board. By the way, I should note, if we would establish the fund at 5.8 million, we'll still be well within the realm of our policy. We would have to put the full 8.8 million into the property tax relief fund in order to have our unassigned fund balance all the way down to that 12% number that I talked about before, which is relative to other places is still quite healthy. It's important for us I should also note, it's important for us to keep that fund healthy because it does matter for our bond rating. If it starts going up and down, specifically the unassigned fund balance, when you start monkeying with that unassigned fund balance, overdrawing it down, you may and likely will run into some bonding issues. We have an amazing AAA bond rating. We don't want to futz with that. So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions, and we have financial experts on the other side of the room who can answer any as well.
Supervisor Mary.
Thank you, Mr. Shulman. You said obviously we wouldn't be sending checks back to people. Would we be saying that this is a fund that when the tax levy comes out, we would just reduce that by a certain percentage, a 0.5%, a 1/4% or something, that would be credited then? The homeowner would know that this is part of your county's tax relief fund, that your taxes have been reduced by 0.5% or some such number.
Yeah, so the hard part will be communicating it because there isn't a simple mechanism like writing a deduction on your tax bill. Like for example, right now you get the the first dollar credit, I think, on your property tax bill, and it shows a deduction. That we can't do that. That's a state function. So the county will have the responsibility of communicating, hey, we cut your tax levy by $500,000 this year. But it's a much easier mechanism, and it would be approved through the budget process.
Well, isn't this a function of the county newsletter that we could use that medium?
Couldn't have thought of a better idea myself.
Thank you. Great idea, sir.
Good job, Supervisor.
Supervisor Bossert.
Okay, I think this is a great idea. I just want to make triple sure that nothing in this will interfere with our ability to fund the radio project. Could you hear that?
Yep. Yeah, I was just waiting for the microphone to go on. You're triple sure.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Do you want me to quadruple? Would that make you feel even better?
No, triple's good enough.
All right.
Okay, any other comments? Yeah, we've talked about this, and this is, giving back people what belongs to them. And we don't need to keep an extra bank that we don't need. So
So I will say to you that what this will do, if we can get this resolution prepped and through by September, which I think we ought to be able to do, but even by October, quite frankly, it will set the stage for a tax levy cut in 2022 and 2023. And probably a significant one at that.
Awesome. Yep. Okay, great, thank you. Okay, moving right along. Resolution declaring official intent to reimburse expenditures on emergency communications project from proceeds of borrowing. Want to explain that?
So Margie is going to explain the detail. This is the borrowing for the radio project, and it's the first of 175 resolutions that you have, 3 resolutions that you have to approve.
So this resolution is one that we haven't normally done here at the county, at this county, in relation to a debt issue. What we're basically doing is just allowing ourselves some flexibility to basically pre-spend that debt issue when we do get the proceeds. So it just helps us to make sure that we spend the debt proceeds within the amount of time that we have to spend them, especially with the size of this project and how it may extend out beyond the normal 2 to 3 year window. So we don't have to act upon it if we decide we don't need to, but it just gives us the opportunity to do so if it would be to our benefit.
Any questions? Entertain a motion. Supervisor Mary, your question? Okay. Mary? Okay, any further discussion? See none, all in favor, signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed?
Aye.
Tim? You're muted.
Oh, I'm unmuted. I.
Is that an aye?
Yes, it is
Aye. Okay.
Aye.
All right, any opposed? It's unanimous. Resolution authorization to transfer designated CIP funds from the jail expansion project to the radio system project.
So this is just as Josh referenced with the property tax relief fund. The board had previously set a resolution to designate funds to the jail for an expansion project. That project is no longer needed, nor is there a need for it in foreseeable future. So we're just asking to repurpose those funds against a different sheriff's project, being the radio instead.
So moved.
Second by Supervisor Dice. Any further discussion? All in favor, signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Supervisor Mahalik?
I said aye. I'm not muted.
Okay, didn't hear you. Just making sure. Any opposed? Motion passes unanimously. Resolution 2022 to 2027 Capital Improvement Plan. Go ahead, Aaron.
All right, thank you, everyone. So with the CIP, I'm not going to go into a lot of detail on the projects. The packet kind of speaks for itself there. Generally speaking, as noted, this funds the radio system, the highway plan, our maintenance plans for our buildings, our parking lots, and our bikes and trails plan as well. So you all have heard the projects for the departments that are under the jurisdiction of the standing committees you belong to. Now, this committee is seeing the full plan after sort of the review and the tweaks made by the county executive's office. So there's a page, it's page 3 of the full CIP document. It's kind of a grid. It outlines the changes essentially that were made after between when it was presented and to what you're seeing now. The changes essentially that the county executive made. In some cases, these projects were changed because we got new data, we got better estimates. Other cases, we've removed projects completely. As noted, one that stands out is the branch 5 for the clerk of court's office. It was kind of unrealistic that we would even get another court branch in time, especially for doing this. So that was removed. We added one project that's the secure parking lot. This project, it's not committing any new money. It's basically combining several previously approved projects into one project. That way we can kind of leverage, and achieve some economies of scale, things like that. The sheriff's shooting range project, that one had a significant increase in costs. So I believe it went from 400,000 to around 900,000. That was, again, we got new estimates, we got better estimates. We moved that project out to 2024. So essentially moved it out of this biennium, moved it out of this budget. So that with the intent of studying it, taking a look at what the options are and having all those conversations, kind of setting the ground game before we act on that. Also on this same form, there are several projects that aren't showing any dollar changes at all. A lot of times these were projects, again, that moved kind of within that 6-year window, back and forth. The next piece would be to direct you to the page immediately preceding that change summary. So page 2 of the full CIP. It's also Exhibit A of the resolution. So this shows on the top section, it shows the funding sources. The bottom section shows the funding uses, basically the project summaries, the expenditures. You'll note that the funding sources and the funding uses, they don't match. That's because, at this point in the process, it's not our intent to tie the sales tax out to the penny. Basically, what we've done is we've identified what we're willing to spend on the CIP. We've made sure that the projects in there for 2022 and 2023 fit within that amount that we're willing to spend. And essentially what we're asking you and for the full board is to approve these projects and these priorities. So that'll set the table for the budget. And you'll actually appropriate these funds through the budget process, which I think I've referenced before. So again, a lot of these projects that are shown in the CIP, they've been approved in past iterations, past years of the CIP. They just kind of move closer and closer to today. So I won't kind of dwell on a lot of that stuff, but really the main story here, I think, is and really in the operating budget is going to be kind of the shift of the ratio that we use of sales tax going to the CIP versus what goes into the operating budget. I think Josh mentioned this at the retreat, but essentially our current plan is to change it from a 60-40 split to somewhere around 51-49. With the commitment to the EDWC's RLF that's been fulfilled. So essentially that frees up $2 million of sales tax. The plan currently is to shift $1 million of that into operating, the operating budget, and then use the other $1 million to fund the radio project, the debt service on the radio project. So I guess at this point, I'd ask the county executive to fill in with anything that I missed. Otherwise, I'm happy to answer questions as well.
So a couple of things that I'd just like to touch on. Thank you, Aaron, for your explanation. It was thorough and addressed most of the highlights of what I changed. As he kind of alluded to, there's really only about a dozen changes, and most of them were horizontal in the document, not vertical. Meaning I didn't drop projects off, I moved them left and right in the years. But the 51-49% is split is worth talking about. as he said, you know the reason why, but kind of a underlying, maybe even more important reason why is the strict interpretation of the law would be that we use sales tax to offset property taxes. This gets us closer to that ultimate goal. I think we can argue that we do that holistically anyway, but this is a more purist interpretation of sales tax replacing property taxes. In regard to what Aaron explained in the differences in revenues and expenses, if you will, sources and uses, depending on the word you want to use, that basically gives us flexibility in the budget process. You'll note we're talking about hundreds of thousands, not millions of dollars. Remember, it's close to $150 million budget that we're dealing with. So that gives us a little bit of flexibility. You may recall from the retreat that I talked about having a goal this biennium of holding the levy flat in both years with a stretch goal of cutting the levy by $250,000 between the property tax relief fund and this difference. That would be enough, we hope, to get us to that stretch goal and beyond if we so choose. So if you look back at previous capital improvement plans, that's not an inconsistency. The numbers historically haven't always matched up. In previous years, we would show kind of a rollover type of an effect from CIP to CIP. So it basically just allows us as a planning tool to have some flexibility in budgeting processes. But long story short, it's all directed towards, similar to our previous conversation about the property tax relief fund, flexibility towards giving people their money back, quite frankly. So that ultimately will be the goal with those dollars. Long story short, I know the shooting range in particular, I expect that it will be a little bit of a hot topic. Just know that it's out of this biennium very intentionally. That 125% increase in cost threw up all kinds of red flags, as you can imagine. I've asked the sheriff and his team to explore all options, including working with private sector partners such as the Range of Richfield and potentially others, as well as working with Aaron and his budget team to analyze all of the costs associated with working with the private sector versus building our own versus talking with other municipalities. It's important to note that currently that range is utilized by law enforcement throughout Washington County, not just Washington County Sheriff's Department. I don't know if it's all law enforcement, but I know there's multiple departments utilizing that facility. So I think it's important that at a minimum, they understand that this is an important resource, whether it's through the private sector or with Washington County, that they're using for limited to no cost, as well as what is the most efficient, effective, and economical way for us to achieve that. So I think pushing it off to 2024 is reasonable. The Sheriff's Department didn't seem to be too concerned about that, and it would give us enough time to kind of go through that planning process as well. So we're happy to answer any questions. Again, Aaron and Margie can help with anything technical. And specifically, if you have technical questions about projections of sales tax, how we came to those, Aaron and Margie can help walk you through that as well.
Is there any questions? Move for approval. Second, Supervisor Mary. Any further discussion? All in favor, signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? Motion carries. Resolution support for 2021 Senate Bill 409 and 2021 Assembly Bill 413. Take a motion.
So moved.
Moved by Supervisor Kelling, seconded by Supervisor Bossert. I guess you can.
Now, Mr. Chairman.
Sure.
Supervisor Boster and Supervisor Mahalik, I just handed out the article from edweek.org. I emailed that to you earlier in the meeting, so hopefully you received that. And again, as I just indicated, I don't expect it to be read now, but I do want to reference it. And I specifically want to reference towards the end of the article. See if I can't find my page. The very tail end, Will Flanders of the Wisconsin Institute for Law and Liberty is quoted. And so feel free to read through this at your leisure. I know nothing about edweek.org, but I certainly know plenty about Wisconsin Institute for Law and Liberty. Will Flanders is their research director, or a research director, and he shared this article not terribly long ago. Will did as well, Will being the Institute for Law and Liberty. And they speak to kind of some of the background of politically, where is the movement coming from regarding this legislation that you're contemplating today. Similar to the discussion that you just had with SEDS, I thought, and the chairman and I talked about this at great length. I thought the timing of these two conversations happening today was very appropriate. I want to commend the executive committee as a whole on how you handled that conversation. I thought that was one of the most professional handlings of a very complicated and difficult discussion that I've seen from this body since I've been with the county. And that's saying something. So thank you for being very pragmatic with that discussion. It's certainly a very sensitive topic. As you contemplate the resolution that's in front of you today, I would ask you to approach it with that same kind of pragmatism. I think the message that you sent earlier in the discussion today is the same message that you should send with whatever you decide with this resolution. I'd ask that you thoughtfully think through some of the concepts that are ultimately spelled out in this article, but maybe more importantly, what are we actually trying to accomplish? If you haven't had an opportunity to review the Senate bill and the Assembly bills that are being referenced that we're supporting, I'd ask you to read through those, at least the summaries. We have a lot of our legislators from our delegation on that legislation, a lot. There are some that are notably not on that legislation, however, and I'd encourage you to read through the list of authors and sponsors and see who is and who is not on that legislation. I'd also suggest that you look at where this legislation is going and doing research in regards to whether it's even going to get to committee or to the floor of the Senate or the Assembly. And I say that because how we react to critical race theory is important. It reminds me of a time when I was a kid, and there was I'll try to make a really long story short, but there was a kid on another team that I was competing against that was frankly just a bully. And I got really mad and wanted quite frankly, just wanted to have a fist fight. And I was a small kid, so I frankly would have got my tail end kicked. But I was that angry with that person. And I let my dad know how angry I was. And it was a competing school in a competing sport. And my dad looked at me, and my dad was known to be loud and boisterous. And my dad said, "Josh, beat him on the field. Beat him on the field." And I think that's exactly what the SEDS discussion was. And I think that's exactly what this discussion is. If we fall into the trap of getting into a legislative fist fight, you're not going to win. You can't legislate morality. It's not possible. And I've struggled with this issue since you allowed me to go to Washington, D.C. as your county administrator, when NACO hosted the Leadership Institute, and when you allowed me to go to Harvard as the administrator for their programming. This issue has been in my face for 4 years, and I'm not sure anybody actually has a solution. But how we address how we address people's concern and CRT as a whole matters. What resolution you ultimately adopt and the words that are in it matter. The chairman and I had a conversation offline about how our dialogue just went and how certain phrases from that conversation can easily be taken out of context, told in a lens from the 1850s, and completely twisted to what we actually believe in this county and the values that I talked about in our great community. So I ask you to be very conscious of that as you make your decisions about what this resolution ultimately is going to say, and more importantly, what legislation you're ultimately going to support. Because when I read the Senate bill and the Assembly bill, what I see is the legislature making a statement, no doubt about that. They're trying to put a flag in the ground, right? But I see them trying to legislate morality. And it's not possible. It's like nailing Jello to a wall. People are going to work their way around the definition of any number of things that are in that bill. So more specifically, how do we get to the root of the problem? And I believe firmly, the reason that I got into local government is I believe firmly in elected local office. That's where you make a difference. Most of you have been in the room when I've given the impassioned speech about, if you're so pissed off about what happened in November, tell me what you did in September and October. And generally the answer is not a damn thing. This really isn't any different. What are we actually doing at the grassroots level to address the issue? Our great community does exactly that. It's why Sewer PAC's jaws dropped on the ground when I was giving the presentation. I didn't even see their faces. It's really about how are we loving our neighbor? And ultimately, what is the legislation that we're going to support at the state level to help us as a conduit to carry that out? I don't see how Senate Bill 409 and Assembly Bill 413 do that today. I see what our resolution is trying to say, and I see it totally getting hijacked and twisted, and little phrases that you say today and tomorrow getting twisted on you and mean something that you don't actually mean. So I think I'm asking you to look at this from the same pragmatic lens that you just discussed, the comprehensive economic development strategy. The chairman and I have had really good dialogue. I feel like the resolution that you have in front of you today is 10,000% better than some of the very, very first drafts from other places, other communities, other states that I have seen. And I'd encourage you to go through all of the same due diligence. That being said, to the chairman, thank you for putting this on an agenda. There are a lot of really concerned parents and people in Washington County, not to mention the state of Wisconsin and the nation, around critical race theory and this issue at hand. I think it's very appropriate for us to take a stand. How we do it is extremely important. And so I appreciate the opportunity to address you. I'm happy to be part of the conversation as you see fit, Mr. Chairman. I'll turn it back to you.
Supervisor Mahalik.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Alluding to County Executive Showman's little metaphor or analogy, whichever you would prefer. You know how you nail Jello to a wall? You use a lot of nails. And so in that respect, I am going to support the resolution as it currently stands, understanding that there is the possibility of moving along, but I think that we have to plant our flag in the ground. I am not one to legislate morality, and I agree with Josh on that. But I think that we need to have our voice heard in this process, and with that, I'm going to support this.
Supervisor Mary.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have two concerns about this topic in this evening's discussion. The first has to do with our role in becoming involved with the actions being taken by and at the level of local school boards. Curriculum in schools is a subject that they are best versed on, and we should not put ourselves in the mix of telling school systems what can and cannot be taught locally. They are independently elected and controlled governmental bodies. What we decide here tonight and again on August 11th can have no real binding effect on actions that school boards will take independent of our thinking. The question for all of you here tonight, I have a question for all of you here tonight. Have you watched or attended any of your local school board meetings where the subject of teaching CRT in schools has been a topic of discussion? I encourage all of you to become so involved if you can before this subject comes up at the entire county board on August 11th. I have attended a number of meetings of the Germantown School Board over the past 3 months, and the discussions and comments brought from the local and some not so local have been dramatic and sometimes emotional, with some staging of having children holding handheld signs standing next to parents while they speak, and even some screaming, yes, literally screaming at school board members when votes didn't go the way that was hoped for. There have also been pleas from parents and other interested citizens to stop the teaching of CRT in classrooms, with mixed race families asking, how can I tell my children that mom is a suppressor, and because we are not both white, my children should be stigmatized by being suppressed? In my own family, I have grandchildren who are Caucasian, some who have been born in Eastern Europe and former communist countries, and some whose grandparents immigrated from Mexico and became U.S. citizens. Under CRT teaching, some of these cousins are oppressed and others are oppressors. How do we explain that to them while they're all at a family gathering? Such is the philosophy of critical race theory. However, back to the question at hand. While we cannot tell districts how to run their organizations, as a constitutional entity, we do have the right and obligation to inform our legislators how we feel as citizens representing the electorate of Washington County. For that reason, I vote to support this resolution and carry it forward to the full board on August 11th. But I encourage all of you to thoroughly read through the legislation that has been proposed, because the real key is the wording, and I quote the proposed legislation: shall not allow instruction to students that promotes race or sex stereotyping in any course or as part of any curriculum, and shall not require an employee to attend a training that teaches, advocates, acts upon, or promotes race or sex stereotyping. This is the key to the legislation. There are those who will tell you that CRT has been taught in the local schools for decades, so why all the excitement now? And they are correct. Students should be made aware of CRT, just as they should be made aware of fascism and socialism and the rise and fall of communist governments. They should also be made aware of the civil rights legislation that was passed decades ago, the purpose of which was to eliminate the type of thinking and societal acceptance of the tenets of critical race theory. The greater harm being done through CRT, or call it equity, or call it whatever the acceptable phrase of the month is, and it will change names. The greater harm is what is being taught and disseminated cleverly out of sight under the guise of in-service meetings for teachers, where there's indoctrination on how to incorporate privileged English and privileged math, and how the basics of reading, writing, and arithmetic are racist. That it's okay to get the answers wrong on a math quiz because modern day math is taught in the United States is racist and based on white privilege. And never mind understanding proper English, because that too is based on white privilege. Then there's the 1619 Project, which portends to rewrite American history entirely, but that's an entirely different thesis. Schools may restrict the teaching of critical race theory to advanced curriculum courses restricted to high school juniors and seniors, with parental consent, of course. Students at that age should have exposure to such doctrines and be able to think for themselves. But there seems to be no effort being made at restricting the tenets of CRT from being part of teacher indoctrination, with lesson plans on how to include the philosophy of CRT into other classes. I will cite one example that's come to our attention from the parent of a first grader in Ozaukee County. When the child was asked what he learned in school that day, the response was that George Washington was a bad man because he owned slaves. This was not a CRT class. It was a lesson about our American presidents. but it was the doctrine of CRT being spread throughout the rest of the curriculum at the school. For that reason, I will vote in favor of this resolution to take this to the full board on August 11th. Thank you.
Supervisor Dice.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Of the 325 pages that we received prior to this meeting and had to review, read, look over, that was how I spent most of my time this past weekend, as well as part of Monday and part of Tuesday. So I did not look at my emails until this morning. I will tell you that of all the items on our agenda for this afternoon, I struggled with this one and woke up during the night thinking about it. As far as CRT goes, I did not know a lot about it, so I did a search on the internet, looked at different articles, newspaper reports, and I was really struggling with this until it finally came into my head. I honestly do not believe that this should go before the county board. I'm not in disagreement with the wording on the resolution that's being proposed. I want to say that to start with. However, we are not a school board. I think this is an issue that needs to be considered by school boards. This is an issue that needs to be seriously considered by parents. And I believe if you are passionate about CRT, that your comments, your feelings should be given to your representatives at the state level, since this is a proposed bills, Senate bills and Assembly bills. I don't think it is the place for the county board to comment on this issue. I agree with Josh completely when he says you can't legislate morality. That is not what we were elected to do. We took this position that we hold to establish policy for our county, to make sure that the taxes we receive are spent wisely in the best interests of those we represent. That is our function. Again, I'm not disagreeing with the resolution, but I think it's something that we need to act on a personal level rather than as a county board. Now, reference my emails again, because when I went on and looked at them this morning, there were several that basically were feeling the same way I am, that this does not belong in front of the county board. So for that reason, I'm going to be voting no. I don't think it should go there. Thank you.
I'm going to make a little comment on yours. I think it is the responsibility and duty of a board of elected officials that represent their citizens to promote and support or oppose legislation that is either positive or negative for their citizenry. So I think it is well within our purview to make our statement as counties throughout Wisconsin continually pass resolutions in favor or opposing pending legislation, whether or not everyone agrees that it should be a county function. We are leaders. We are persons that are to lead by example, to represent our citizens. And if we fail to take a stand against something that is inherently evil, let me just read one thing about critical race theory from the resolution. Critical race theory promotes divisiveness by defining race not as a biological trait, but as a social construct to oppress and exploit people of color. I actually do agree that race is a social construct because we're all members of the human race, no matter what the color of our skin is. But critical race theory teaches young children that because of your color, you are either inferior or superior. I think that's a dangerous and evil ideology. It's Marxist in nature. It takes its roots from the Marxist philosophy of dividing people, not by class, but by race. And if we are ever to become a united country, this is the things we need to fight against, further dividing our country. I think actually the last whereas in our resolution is so very appropriate. Whereas at the College Opportunity Summit on December 4th, 2014, President Barack Obama said, "Now as a nation, we don't promise equal outcomes, but we were founded on the idea that everybody should have an equal opportunity to succeed. No matter who you are, what you look like, where you come from, you could make it. That's an essential promise of America. Where you start should not determine where you end." And I think that is exactly what we're saying. The critical race theory says that because of where you start, what you look like, where you came from, you can't make it unless you get a leg up on everybody else. And I think that is false. It subjugates people, especially persons of color, and it puts them in a place, or it assumes that they don't have the skills necessary to succeed on their own whereabouts. So I'm voting, obviously, I'm voting in favor of this. I think critical race theory has no place in our society, period. End of story. We could talk about history and talk about all the bad stuff that happened with our history. I'm fine with that. Teach history as it occurred. This is revisionist history. This is no forgiveness, but only retribution for past mistakes and past sins and past crimes that were committed. It's just not the way society runs. So I'm going to be in support of this, and I think it's necessary for us as leaders to step forward and do this. Supervisor Bossert.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I am also going to be in support of this. I will respectfully disagree with Supervisor Dice on her opinion of our role. When Congress in the 1960s passed the Civil Rights Act, it would have been easy for them to say, fair housing is not our issue. That's up to local housing boards. Equal education is not our issue. That should go to local education boards. Equal employment isn't our issue. That should go to local employment boards. Congress didn't do that. They set a national standard for equality, and that was the right action for them to take. So that's one reason why I respectfully disagree with Supervisor Dice. I also believe that a majority of our constituents oppose critical race theory, and we need to represent them. And I also believe a lot of the emails we're getting from people who are saying that this isn't really an issue for the county. If we were taking the exact opposite position and supporting critical race theory, they would be taking the exact opposite position and saying we should absolutely be supporting this. There is no better time to do what's right than today. That was quoted earlier by Don directly from Martin Luther King Jr. I know I didn't get the words exactly right, but let's do this. Let's vote for this, pass it on to the full board. I'm in full support of this. Thank you.
Just to let you know, the amount of emails I've seen since I think I last looked at it about 3:45 was 13 favoring our resolution and 4 opposing. Supervisor Kelly.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. To echo what's been said, I don't wet my finger and put it up in the air to see which way the wind's blowing. So I won't do that when it comes to the emails. I can only vote on my morality and my conscience, and then leave it to the voters of my district to either agree or disagree with my opinion. And that's what drives me every day. Having said that, though this may not be a county matter in particularly, as a municipal elected official, somebody whom the people of my district has put in there to serve their interests, I believe it is not my duty, but my obligation to make sure that I comment on anything that might affect our children or our community. And anywhere I see injustice, that I can point it out. It was once said that all it takes for evil to prevail is for good men to do nothing. And I intend to be a good man. I will support this resolution because I believe that any and all litmus test of the color of your skin for anything is disgusting and repugnant in the eyes of my Lord and Savior. I do understand that perhaps this legislation may not be worded in the best way or the best light. And I also understand that you could have a case where they could change the wording ever so slightly. And you're playing the equivalent of whack-a-mole, where now they're, well, this isn't critical race theory, this is critical colors theory, or, you know, they can change it up to all different ways, and then you're just chasing after, you're falling for their little trap of let's just keep talking about race and fighting about what skin color is the correct one for what. I don't believe in any of that stuff. But having said that, we have to make a stand somewhere. And while this legislation may or may not be perfect, I don't know. It is my hope that we can at least send a message that we fight against this, that we are against any type of racial quota or litmus test of skin color to provide for the people. And I certainly don't want it taught to my grandchild. So I will be voting to put this forward to the full board. I look forward to active communication by our constituents as well as the board itself. And I really do hope that our legislators do perhaps a better job of wording it, or at least just keep in mind some of the things that we had to say here today. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Any more discussion? Supervisor Dice?
Mr. Chairman, I applaud your comments about CRT. I don't disagree with anything you said. I want to make that perfectly clear. But I still believe that it is not our business to bring something like this before the full county board. That's the only reason I'm voting no.
Thank you.
So.
Okay, any further comments? Hearing none. Oh, Josh,
If I may, Mr. Chairman.
go ahead.
Thank you. Just a couple of follow-ups on some of your commentary today. I draw your attention to the resolution that you're considering. 2021 Resolution 26, supporting 2021 Senate Bill 409 and 2021 Assembly Bill 413. Line number 10 through line number 36. I trust and pray that you've read all of that. And I would say, despite the the concern that maybe it's not the best wording or the best light, I would contend it's very good wording and it's very good light. Line 42, line 46 through this, now page 2, line 5, I would say that the same is true. Furthermore, I would draw your attention even closer to Senate Bill 409 and Assembly Bill 413. And I would ask, what are you supporting? Specifically, in those bills, what are you supporting? Because if you haven't read those bills, I would suggest you don't pass this resolution. And based on your commentary from every single person, you haven't read those bills. Because if you've read those bills, you know this has nothing to do with local school districts. It actually has everything to do with universities and technical colleges. And that other assembly bills and Senate bills address local school districts. And yet another assembly bill and Senate bill address local governments. That was the only point I was trying to make. To compare yourself to Congress or even the state legislature is inaccurate and borderline embarrassing. You're not the legislature and you're not Congress. For you to take a stand is completely appropriate. It's why I helped the chairman write the language that's in the resolution today. And again, I think the wording, the phraseology of the SEDS discussion was perfect. While there could have been imperfections, the message was spot on. But knowing what you're supporting matters. Knowing how you're fighting CRT matters. I know because I spent 4 weeks at Harvard having this discussion. This is a really complicated discussion, and you don't even know what you're actually supporting. My ask is that you take the time to figure out what you're actually supporting, because I think there actually is a window for you to be able to help Supervisor Dice become comfortable. You're never going to get some of the other folks to be comfortable, and that's not going to happen, because the letter to the editor today doesn't even know what critical race theory is. The premise of that letter to the editor was, we're all children of God. And the lessons of the Bible, the biblical lessons are, we're all sinful human beings and we can never get over that. And there's nothing we can do. That's correct. But it forgets the other side. The gift of God is eternal life. Your sins are behind you. Move forward with what's ahead of you. Critical race theory assumes that you're sinful forever and there's nothing you can do and you're damned to hell. And the whole nation's damned to hell. Forget everything that we've done. Throw it all out and start over. You have to know legislation is extraordinarily important. What your message coming out of this is going to be, as Christian tried to articulate you on SEDS, is extraordinarily important. You supporting something and taking a stand, it is extraordinarily important. But know the stand you're taking. Because the one you're about to take makes no freaking sense. The one you intend to take makes all the sense in the world. Take the time and get it right. I'm going to draw your attention now, if you will, Mr. Chairman, to the article that I handed out to you, and specifically the last 4 paragraphs on the back page. These are quotes and references to the Wisconsin Institute for Law and Liberty, and they're talking about legislation specifically in South Carolina and Wisconsin, which actually is the legislation in part that you're contemplating today. Along with banning some divisive concepts, which is most of what this legislation is doing, it would require schools to publicly list the materials that teachers use in their lessons. Supervisor Mary, you don't want to tell school districts what to do, but Assembly Bill 411 does exactly that. That's the front end. The back end is they want to create transparency in curriculum. That's, I think, what you actually want. For the people who are showing up to those school board meetings, whether it's in Slinger, because I have watched some of them, whether it's in Slinger or it's in Germantown or it's in Hartford or any other school district or any other school in Washington County, want to know what their kids are being taught. That's really it. This bill kind of does that. But it also puts a whole lot of restrictions and requirements on schools, including publishing a lot of information and opening them to potential legal exposure. Oh, and by the way, Assembly Bill 414, which is one of the three in this package, would create a circumstance that would allow local employees for local governments, which by the way, we are one, to file complaint with the Department of Revenue regarding alleged violations, and to file civic actions seeking declaratory or injunctive relief regarding an alleged violation of the bill. If the employee is successful in the civil action, the court must award the employee attorney's fees. If you adopt this and were to include Assembly Bill 414, which is part of the package that I think you're trying to reference, you're literally supporting legislation that puts us in legal jeopardy. I know that's not really what you want to do. What we really want to do is create transparency so that people at a local level, the grassroots, I think is the term you use, Supervisor Mary, the grassroots can solve it at a school board meeting without having to do what Slinger School District is trying to do, and I believe Supervisor Conrath and a number of others, and having to review all of the curriculum and potentially submit open records requests and all these other things. That's crazy. The sentiments that you're espousing against critical race theory and Marxism and socialism and communism are spot on. The resolution you pass matters. Give yourself enough respect to look at what's in that resolution and get it right the first time. Because what Christian was trying to tell you earlier is, if you get it wrong, you don't control the narrative once it's out the door. You get it right on the front end, and you can achieve the goal that you're looking for. I said that the legislature, I believe, is trying to put a flag in the sand. A flag in the sand. I think that's exactly what they're attempting to do. Get something out that tries to address the issue. This legislation can be improved and can address, I think, what you're actually trying to do. But make sure it's right, and it isn't today. If you want to take it to the board and have them vote on it, fine, do it. But put it in such a way that there's actually something to support that I think you really support.
So the solution?
My suggestion is that you postpone it until the next executive committee meeting. We both take the time to actually not just read through the summaries, but through the legislation and figure out what do we support and what don't we support, and then make a determination if that's worthy of a resolution or if you're simply making a statement. That would be my suggestion, because there's a lot to digest in these three
Yeah,
bills.
Well, in 409 and 413, it does address something that's within our county. We have the UW system.
Yes.
We have UW extension.
Yes.
So it does pertain to us in particular.
True.
I understand there's some other things and there's other legislation. It would likely behoove us to support legislation to, I don't know if the right words, to ban the teaching of critical race theory, that we support the concept rather than a specific bill. Is that what you're getting at?
I think what I'm getting at is we need to flesh out the wordsmithing that you're trying to do right now.
Okay.
And I don't know the answer to the question, because in my cursory review, there's things that I have concerns with and how it's drafted. But I think in theory, I understand what you're attempting. And the reason I brought up school districts is because it was mentioned at least 3 times by 3 different supervisors. And this bill, yes, I completely agree with you. It's not that it's not pertinent to us. It's that it's a thread of 5 things that are pertinent to us in 3 bills that came really as a pack. They weren't presented as a package, but they're essentially a package of legislation. So I think my suggestion is 90% of what's in this resolution is spot on, I think. And I think every supervisor here went down a similar path. It comes down to what are you actually supporting? And the lines that I left out, that I omitted, are the ones that I think we need to think about what those actually say. Line 38 through 40 on page 1, which calls out specifically the bills. Line 42 through 44, which tries to summarize what those bills are intended to do. And then finally, on page 2, basically line 7 through line 13, that tries to, again, spell out the bills and specifically say, this is what we resolve to do. Because I don't think you actually resolve to just support 413, which is with regard to UW system and the technical college system. I don't think that's it. I mean, it's kind of part of it, but there's an underlying premise that you're trying to get at. Correct?
That's correct.
So I think we spend time, and this is, you and I worked on this, but it's complicated enough that I think this discussion was a good one because it gives us enough information. And I thank you, Mr. Chairman, for bringing it up, because this is exactly the dialogue you need to get to a resolution that actually is achieving what I think it is that this body is trying to communicate, and the stand that you're saying you're trying to take.
Okay. Supervisor Mahalik?
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I guess I'm a little bit confused because Josh mentioned in his comments that he worked with you, Chairman Kriefel, to wordsmith this resolution, and then he spends an inordinate amount of time, considering the separation that we have now between the county executive rather than the county administrator and the county board, lecturing the people who have maybe differing opinions and doing so, I think, an inordinate amount of finger wagging at those of us who are now a separate member or in a separate member. Whenever I make any type of a comment to Josh, I am firmly put in my place that I was not executive or elected the county executive. That's right. And he doesn't sit on the county board. We may do things that he just doesn't necessarily agree with, and I can understand some of his wisdom, and that's fine. But I don't know. I just, it seemed more mocking than it needed to be. And personally, I took offense to that. Thank you.
Supervisor Bossert?
Okay, I also took a little bit of offense to some of the remarks of the county executive. I have read all 3 of the bills, and maybe the resolution should have all 3. I've quoted the key 8 prohibitions in my response emails to some of the inquiries I've gotten. And I believe I've copied the chairman of the county board and the county executive on a couple of those emails. I have read through these. I did not compare us to Congress. I compared the arguments Supervisor Dice was making to the arguments that some may have made in Congress in the 1960s when passing the Civil Rights Act. Now, it's interesting, the county executive points out the potential to expose us to legal liability, but that claim could also be made about any law that Congress may pass or any ordinance we may pass. The Civil Rights Act creates potential for liability for our government. And the way to avoid that is don't violate it, and then do your best to make sure you don't have frivolous complaints. But if you do, you challenge them and you win in court. I'm in support of this. If we want to take a month to adjust the language, I'm okay with that. I think we should mention all 3 bills because all 3 are companion bills together. And I would support an amendment to add all 3 in there. But for now, let's make the motion to postpone for a month, knowing that it may come back to us with a few possible revisions. So I'm going to make that motion. And that
I'm going
way
to interrupt
we can.
here for just 1 second, Mr. Chairman, excuse me. there is business on the table right now, we can make that motion to postpone into a motion to a time specific, and then it can proceed. So
Yep,
we
I
would
said
have to-
postpone for a month. That would be time specific. Yep.
Actually, to keep it up, it needs to be an actual time with something on the table. So say, for example, 7:30 at the next.
So my postponement would be until the next county executive meeting. I think that's always been understood when we make motions to postpone for a month. So the next county executive meeting on whatever date that falls.
August 18th at 4:30 PM.
Yep, perfect. So that's my motion.
Seconded by Supervisor Kelly. Any further discussion on this? Okay. Supervisor Kelly?
As to the motion, and what I'm seconding, then is my understanding, we look at this and we try to come to an agreement, and with the county executive's help, whom I appreciate. I understand, some people might have taken offense, and that's okay. I didn't. I've had him call me out before, and I've called him out too. So I'm not going to be too worried about it, because this is the place to do it. We're here to sometimes we got to get a little rough, and that's why you're here. But he's also offering to help us to draft a good quality piece that we can actually sink our teeth into and send out here with pride. So I think that's important too. I've always said, and certainly famously, we have to make sure that we're doing things right. And I can agree with that. And so I'm pretty enthusiastic about moving forward with this the right way. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, could I respond to the comments about me?
And one of the things that the county executive has recommended is not changing the meat, so to speak, of the resolution, just the citations to what legislation we are actually supporting. Am I correct in that assessment?
Yes.
Okay, go ahead.
So first of all, I was asked by the chairman to review the content of the resolution relative to the wording. There's several whereas clauses that were added. I was not asked to review the legislation. I was not asked to specifically look at bill numbers. I was simply asked to help write a resolution. That was it. Is that an accurate statement?
Correct.
So when we came to this meeting, knowing that we had the SEDS item on the agenda, I wanted to know what we were talking about. I took the time to print the bills. I appreciate the fact that some of you did and some of you didn't. That's certainly fine. If you knew about it, I don't know why you didn't make an amendment before I said it. But the fact of the matter is, what you have in front of you isn't what you support based on everything that you just said. So my only ask is, and I'm sorry if you felt like I was finger wagging, but my only ask is put out a piece of legislation that you actually fully support and you know exactly what you're supporting. That's it. And I think it's not going to be that difficult to get it to a spot where you can approve it as a body and where you don't get to the county board and they go, wait a minute, what are we at? This doesn't make any sense. That's it. And to Supervisor Kelling's point, that's exactly what committee meetings are for.
Flush it out. Yep.
Get it right.
Yep. So we have a motion on the floor to postpone in a second. And oh, I'm sorry, Supervisor Barron.
Just a concurrence on this. I agree totally with us postponing this as long as we come forward with a document that truly does reflect what we want to do. And yes, Mr.
Well, he
Lost his mic.
Yeah, transparency at the local schools is extremely important. As we're finding, particularly in the Germantown situation, yeah, the board threw everybody a bone and said, okay, we're only going to teach this to the senior level students, but they didn't say a thing about the in-service training and all the indoctrination that's been done to the teachers about how to involve critical race into other curricula. And again, this comes down to a transparency measure. Thank you, sir.
Okay, seeing no further discussion, we'll vote on postponement of the resolution 26 to August 18th at 4:30 PM. All in favor, signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye. Aye.
I didn't get Tim.
I said aye.
Okay. Motion carries unanimously. I don't need to ask for nays. Everybody said yay. Okay, next meeting date, Wednesday, August 18th at 4:30 PM. We are hereby adjourned.